Singularity. Lord of Mysteries Chapter 81 to 100. Blinded Visionary. In the basement of St. Selena Cathedral, in the guardroom outside Channy's Gate. Leonard Mitchell was leaning on the back of his chair, his legs were propped up on the table. His sighs were vacant without any focus. Even though he had been healed using ritualistic magic, he still looked terrible, as if he had obtained a reprieve from a severe illness without fully recovering. At the moment, the powerful Beyonders sent by the Holy Cathedral were creating another seal behind the Channy's Gate since the ashes of St. Selena were lost. They had conflicting opinions. Some wanted to fill in the gap of power using a new holy item, while others believed that there was no need to go through all the trouble. After all, to the Church of the Evernight Goddess, holy items were rare and incredibly precious. What they suggested was lowering the presence of the Nighthawks in Tingen and transferring the artifacts with living characteristics or difficult to seal artifacts to the headquarters at the Cathedral of Serenity in Backland's diocese, only leaving behind those that could be controlled more casely. They intended to send a telegram to propose a mechting of the higher-ups, to get a vote from the archbishops and high-ranking deacons. Leonard was uninterested in this debate. He felt as if he had become a living corpse, with no sorrow, grief, agitation, or excitement. He was abnormally numb. He didn't want to face anyone. All he wanted was to stay alone in the corner. Occasionally, he would feel puzzled about why the murderer would only take away Klein's Beyander characteristic and leave Captain Dunsmith's intact. Thud, thud thud, footsteps reverberated in the corridor. Sika Tron, whose right arm had been bandaged, appeared at the door of the guardroom. While Klein and the others were attacking Megos and attempting to save Tingen City, she and the keepers within Channy's Gate were doing battle against a portion of the sealed artifacts. If it wasn't for the timely arrival of the members of the mandated Punishers and the machinery hivemind, or the eventual arrival of the reinforcements from the Holy Cathedral, she also might have lost her life. But even so, the elderly keeper failed to last until the end. He fought to his death, under the call of duty. Leonard, I found an unencrypted telegram in the captain's office. It was sent over by the Holy Cathedral, Sika Tron said. Leonard's green eyes moved slightly, finally coming to life. He faintly recalled the sound of a new telegram coming in, but the battle was about to begin. He and Klein didn't have the time to pay attention to it. What does it say? Leonard noticed that his tone was unusually raspy. The white-haired and black-eyed Sika Tron replied without hesitation, beware of Ince Zangwil. Beware of scaled artifact 008. Ince Zangwil, the archbishop that betrayed the church, the gatekeeper who failed his advancement. Sealed artifact 008, an ordinary-looking quill, Leonard muttered at first as he searched his memories, then he tilted his head to the side. He suddenly narrowed his eyes, and the dispirited feelings and sadness disappeared from his body. So that's how it was. Leonard pulled his feet back and stood up, his green eyes burning with a passion. He looked at Sika Tron and said, I intend to apply to join the Red Gloves. The Red Gloves was a code name for the elite team of Nighthawks. Under normal circumstances, Nighthawk teams were situated locally and had regions under their jurisdiction. They were not permitted to capture criminals outside of their area of jurisdiction without permission. As such, some evildoers would change their location after every crime, making it terribly inconvenient for the Nighthawks. To deal with this, the Church of the Evernight Goddess set up the Red Gloves. They were carefully selected elites, some even possessing incomplete holy items. Their mission was to reinforce Nighthawk teams that had called for help, as well as track down and arrest evildoers without any restrictions. In some circles, they were also called pursuers, or hunting dogs. Red Gloves, but their lowest requirement is sequence 7. Besides, the dangers the Red Gloves face are many times higher than an ordinary Nighthawk squad, Sika Tron said in concern and doubt. Leonard smiled coldly. I'm close to advancing soon. His eyes became cold. He clenched his teeth and said to himself, I want revenge. Ince Zangwil, you must live until the day I become powerful enough. If Max was here, he would have made a pouty face while crying in his heart, thinking something along the lines of, now that is true friendship. All right, Sika seemed to have guessed Leonard's thoughts. She sighed. Almost half of our team will be new faces. It's rare to see a Nighthawk team become so ravaged. Leonard's expression darkened. He clenched his teeth and asked, are the bodies ready? Yes, Sika nodded indiscernibly. Leonard suddenly stepped towards the door. I'll notify their families. I'll deal with the scene I don't want to deal with the most, I'll do it. At 2 Daffodil Street, Melissa sat on the sofa, inspecting the 3 tickets in her hands. She was looking at the words, the printed date, and the seat numbers. Benson was sitting beside her, observing his sister with a smile. He had a relaxed posture. Suddenly, they heard the doorbell. Ding dong ding dong. Melissa glanced at their busy maid Bella, and then she took the 3 tickets with her and stood up, looking a little confused. She briskly ran to the door. Her black hair was shinier than it was before, and her face was no longer skinny. The color of her skin had a ruddy color, and her brown eyes looked brighter and energetic. Twisting the handle and opening the door, Melissa froze for a moment. She didn't recognize their visitor. It was a young man with black hair and green eyes. He looked handsome, but his face was unusually pale. Hidden in his CYCS was deep sorrow. "May I know who you are?" Melissa asked, feeling somewhat lost. Leonard had specially draped a black formal coat over his white shirt. He said in a raspy voice, "I'm a colleague of your brother Klein." Melissa's heart suddenly skipped a beat. She instinctively tiptoed to look behind Leonard but didn't notice anything. She said with a strange quiver in her voice, "Where's Klein?" Leonard closed his eyes, inhaling as he said, "I'm very sorry, your brother Klein died at the hands of an evil criminal while he was trying to save others. He's a hero, a true hero." Melissa widened her eyes slowly, her body shaking indiscernibly. The 3 tickets in her hands dropped helplessly onto the floor. The tickets faced upward, revealing the name of the play, The Return of the Count. Sitting in the Moretti family's living room, Leonard didn't dare to look directly at Melissa and Benson. But he couldn't stop scenes of what they looked like from flashing through his mind. That girl filled with youthfulness and vibrancy had her eyes wide open. She didn't speak, and her eyes were unfocused. Her silence made her appear like a puppet. The man who looked a little like Klein maintained a normal posture, but he would slip into a daze from time to time. His words came out slowly, "That's the gist of the matter. I'm very sorry that I was unable to prevent it in a timely manner. The Blackthorn Security Company, the police department, and those that he helped have promised a bereavement compensation of about £6,000. Leonard said, as his eyes darted around. Suddenly, Benson interrupted him. His voice was hoarse as he asked, "Where's his body?" "I'm asking where's Klein's body." He puckered his lips and paused. "When can we see him?" "In the company. You can see him now," Leonard answered, unable to mask his grief. "All right." Benson moved his rigid lips with great difficulty. "Let me use the bathroom first." Without waiting for Leonard's reply, he quickly entered the bathroom and slammed the door closed. He stood in front of the sink and turned on the tap, allowing the water to flow. He bent down and repeatedly splashed water onto his face. As he did that, his actions came to a sudden stop. Nothing changed for a long time, leaving only the sound of running water reverberating in the bathroom. A few minutes later, Benson lifted his head and looked into the mirror. He saw that his face was covered in water droplets. The redness in his eyes was impossible to hide now. Max opened his eyes to the sunlight shining on his face through the thick canopy of green leaves. He could feel his spirituality in considerable chaos, but his own and Samuel's souls were able to settle it down and bring it under control, especially after absorbing the vast amounts of energy from the potion. He quickly closed his eyes and felt the changes to his body, spirituality, and abilities. Firstly, his ability to attract and repel had been boosted by 30% and had become just as precise when controlling it. Another important improvement to his existing ability was that he no longer needed to physically touch an object to bend the density of a person or object. Anything within 5 meters of him could be affected, and the intensity by which it could be changed had increased by 20%. Unfortunately, he still did not have any physical improvements, meaning his stamina, strength and speed were still at the level of a human. Though the constant practice of martial arts had indeed improved his physique to that of an average athlete, someone who was confident in being able to run for 25 kilometers without stopping. There were new abilities that the potion brought to Max, the most important and seemingly overpowered ability being the ability to fool the Beyonder abilities of other Beyonders, of course with the limit being sequence 8. There was no actual description of this, but Max could figure it out with some experimentation. His other abilities included anti-divination, anti-danger, spiritual intuition, and anti-illusion up to sequence 8. This was incredibly useful for the most dangerous kind of Beyonders, those who could affect you through non-observable means or locate you through divination. Basically, he had become an anti-fool pathway. With these passive abilities, he could easily take care of most of the seer pathway individuals who were at or below sequence 8. He could also substitute himself with paper figurines, giving him the ability to leave them nearby and teleport to them as long as they were not too far from his location, and secondly create a convincing duplicate of his body using the paper figurines. Though he would need to constantly supply it with spirituality to maintain the illusion. Other than these, he also had 2 new abilities that were not too useful. He could sense the historical void and enter it, and he could see spirit body threads, but could not actually use them. The former just further boosted his ability to hunt down those of the seer or fool's pathway, while the latter was just something that would help him locate those at the higher sequences of the same pathway, without actually providing any special abilities other than that. Still, he now had one of the most important aspects of the Beyonder ability, and that was the ability to fool the powers of other Beyonders. He would no longer need to hide completely from the official Beyonders, and could now actively use his abilities on Earth. Of course, getting involved with those Beyonders who were higher than sequence and was not something he could afford, so he still had to be very careful. He grinned. His current powers were most useful against actual Beyonders. As such, they would not help him too much on independence. Instead, he would be far more productive on Earth, at least until he got his next sequence. Max closed his eyes again to observe the now visible abilities and the details of the ritual of Sequence 7 of his pathway, which were previously only brief summaries. Singularity Pathway, Sequence 7, Blinded Visionary. Potion Formula: 100 milliliters of pure water, 2 strands of gargoyle fur, 2 eyes of the silver python. Ritual: ingest the potion after creating a plan that perfectly foils the advancement ritual of at least a Sequence 5 Beyonder advancing to Sequence 4. Powers: can envision reality to create Beyonder artifacts using large amounts of spiritual energy, or using other Beyonder characteristics for the same up to Sequence 7. Can visualize prophecies created using Beyonder abilities. Can break prophecies made by Beyonder abilities as long as you physically touch at least one character who is part of the prophecy up to Sequence 7. Can take life away from anything virtual or immaterial that has been given life by Beyonder abilities up to Sequence 7. Partial mythical form controlled can convert parts of your body into the mythical creature form that greatly reduces incoming damage, both physical and spiritual. Strengthen abilities. Attract and repel are 20% stronger and more precise control. Change the density of objects 15 meters around you by 10% more. Can fool Beyonder's abilities up to Sequence 7. Unchanged abilities: anti-divination, anti-danger, spiritual intuition, anti-illusion up to Sequence 7. Can substitute self with paper figurines, teleport nearby and body double. Can sense the historical void, gray fog of history, and enter it. Can see spirit body threads. Acting: unknown. But this was the next sequence that he would gain after not only completing the potion but also the ritual. While Max was looking at this, he instinctively decided to send some of the unity energy to his mind and body to cleanse the outside influence, only to realize that none of the energy was actually used. Momentarily stunned, he stopped planning for how he would try and complete the ritual for the next potion and instead focused more on this new incident. He quickly returned to his body from inside the amalgamation of all and stopped thinking for a moment. Peace. At last, a broad smile appeared on Max's face after a long time of frowning and sad expressions. It was a genuine smile like that of a child seeing its family after a long time of being lost. He no longer had any outside influence subtly or otherwise, trying to Professor X his mind into having certain types of thoughts. Whatever it was, either his new abilities completely blocked it or had made its tracking method useless for the time being, making him safe for now. And this was good because he was not in his most stable state at the moment. He needed to quickly figure out the method of acting for his new potion, Fool's End, and digest it sufficiently so that he would not easily lose control. Considering the main ability is to fool Beyonder abilitics, I think using it on Beyonders will likely have some progression towards digesting my potion. Or perhaps it might be something else entirely, but I should try it out first. I should head back to Earth and begin experimenting. But first, last chapter of mass release. The next chapter will be released after the novel reaches a rate of 7K views per chapter once again. This would be around 539K or 540K views. I will continue to write chapters in the meantime. Please write reviews and comments, they add a lot of views by default. I don't earn anything from this, and it is purely for my own satisfaction, that something I write actually means something to others. Thank you. Update. I have changed the min sequence of Beyonder Ritual, for Blinded Visionary Ritual. mainly because there are no rituals for advancing from sequence 6 to 5. Rituals only start from sequence 5 to 4 and afterwards. Sorry for the change. Rage and hello. Max brought all the villagers together to give a speech. After a bit of joking to lighten up the mood and bring everyone closer emotionally, he finally began the motivational part of his speech. You know, I was an orphan. No parents, no family, no relatives. No friends or otherwise. Nobody. Just me, alone, trying to survive, not very successfully, considering I had been kidnapped and from my home and brought to a completely unknown place. But alive. But an old man took me in. Giving me odd jobs to do in his shop, in exchange for a place to live and food, he essentially adopted me. Though I did not know him for too long, I knew he was a kind man. One with a strange past, that was long behind him. Unfortunately, that past soon caught up with him, resulting in his untimely demise. No, not on accident, he was murdered. But that is beside the point. Max took a dramatic pause for added effect, before continuing. Old man Euxis once told me about a poem his brother-in-arms had told him long ago. And I think it is only apt that I take this chance to tell you the same poem on this occasion where we are all in grief. I know it has only been a few days since the incident, but this poem is one of the few things that kept me going after the old man passed on. This and my faith in the primordial unity. Do not go gentle into that good night, old age should burn and rave at close of day, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning they. Do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learn, too late, they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men, near death, who see with blinding sight. Blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless, me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light. As Max had been orating the poem with as much emotion as he could, he did not notice that one by one, those who had lost someone to the monster stood up with solemn looks on their face. Many of them had already chosen to follow Unity to be their spiritual support and were invigorated by this poem. Their sorrow had turned into anger. Anger against the monster, anger against the world, and anger against their own powerlessness. As Max continued, more and more people stood up. Not all of them had lost someone in the attack, but they too felt the raw emotions Max was portraying. They could feel something burning within their hearts as they each stood up. As soon as Max finished, he drew the unity symbol on his chest, above his heart, and everyone present followed him instinctively. It was once said by a wise man, everyone wants to be unique, yet nobody truly wants to stand out from the others. If enough people do something, as long as it does not go against the bottom lines of those involved, almost everyone else will follow as well. And just like that, Max had converted basically the entire town into his believers. It was now time to return to Earth. Perhaps even give little Klein a little scare along the way. A few days later, in a corner of the Raphael cemetery. After finishing Dunn's funeral, the crowd gathered before a new tombstone. On it was Klein's photograph, in black and white. All his family and friends, at least what was left of them, all quietly stood around it as the priest gave the eulogy and prayers. After giving their own thoughts on Klein, everyone left one by one. Night time, at the Raphael cemetery. The copper-skinned Azek stood in front of Klein's grave holding a bouquet of white flowers. He didn't speak for the longest time until he finally sighed and muttered to himself, "I'm sorry, I was 10 minutes late. But I think I know who it was." He bent over and set the bouquet of flowers down before turning to leave the cemetery. He also left Tingen, but he didn't retrieve the copper whistle. On the way out of Tingen, he brushed past a young man with silver hair, and rather evident red eyes under the blood-red moon. Still, in but an instant, the memory of the person he just met vanished from his already unstable mind. Max hid behind a corner with his heart beating incredibly fast. That was an extremely dangerous situation he had not expected to come across. Instinctively he had activated his fooled Azek Eggers Beyander abilities, which somehow affected his memories and made him forget about Max. In reality, this should not have been possible. However, Mr. Azek Eggers did not even know of his own true sequence, and as a result, his spirituality did not subconsciously use the power and abilities belonging to a sequence to Beander, and allowed Max's ability that was limited to sequence into work. And in that very instant that Max fooled such a small part of the Death Console's Beander ability to resist all kinds of attacks, and make that ability resist the memories of Max. Everything had happened in but half a second, and then Max had run with all his might. However, in the process, he also gained something incredible. He had gained an incredible amount of digestion. Just fooling a sequence to Beander once had made him digest the potion by 30% in an instant. After taking a while to calm himself down, Max made his way to the Raphael Cemetery. The place was quiet and serene under the illumination of the crimson moonlight. Suddenly, the stone slab scaling the grave was flipped open. A pale hand extended out from the soil. A hand came out. Whoosh! The gravestone was shoved aside. The lid of the coffin was pushed open. Klein sat upright and looked around, lost. His memory was still frozen at the scene with the brand new leather boots, and the palm that grabbed onto the urn of Saint Selena's ashes. Everything after that felt like a dreamless sleep. Klein instinctively lowered his head and unbuttoned his shirt. He looked at the left side of his chest, only to see that his ravaged injury and missing heart were squirming as they healed, similar to how he recovered from the bullet wound through his temple back when he looked into the mirror. The only difference was that this time, the recovery was much slower and much more difficult. "Hello there." Max's jovial voice suddenly brought Klein out of his musings in great shock. "Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories." Odd conversation. In the northern part of the Lowen Kingdom, the September breeze, which had an additional coldness to it, howled through the cemetery. It was even gloomier and colder than usual. The pair of a dead body coming to life a second time, and a dead body coming to life once, one knowing nothing about the other, while the latter knowing almost everything about the former, made an odd scene in the cemetery. The cold jolted Klein back to his senses and quickly began to think of a way to escape the situation. "Oh, Mr. Fool, you don't have to worry about anything. It's me, Death, not the kind to come for you when your time is up, but the one you know and love." "Ah, so it's Mr. Dia." In the middle of his sentence, Klein froze as the first words finally registered in his mind. The entire fiasco of dying once more and reviving moments later only to find himself inside a coffin deep underground had caused a lot of non-essential thoughts to occupy his mind. Though at this very moment, all such thoughts vanished as his heart began to race once more. One of his biggest secrets had somehow been exposed. His eyes darted around, seeing nothing around them, only to return to the silver-haired Mr. Death, and saw a horrifyingly wide smile plastered on his oddly stiff face. Suddenly, a hand burst out of Max's left chest, holding a still beating heart. Instantly, Kaelson was horrified by the similar scene and quickly looked back at his own chest, only to see it had only completely healed. "PFF, ha ha ha, you should see the look on your face." Klein suddenly heard Max's voice as he saw that the hand was actually Max's own hand, that he had pulled from his sleep and extended out from inside his rather old and dirty robe. Then his eyes went to the heart in his hand, which was only a damp red cloth clumped together in a shape resembling a heart, while Mr. Death's hand squeezed it ever so slightly in a pattern to simulate a beating heart. Klein sighed ruefully. Thankfully, it was just fake, but wait. How does Mr. Death know about how I was killed? And how does he know about me being Mr. Fool? All right, don't fret yourself. I cannot answer too many of your questions either way. Plus, I can only talk with you for a short while. It was true. At the moment, Max was crazily burning through the Unity energy. Every second that passed, an absurd amount was being transferred directly to his body and fooling all Beander abilities trying to affect him or observe him. Of course, if he continued this, he would only be able to last another 30 seconds before all the Unity energy, all the gas, liquid, and solid energy stored in the amalgamation of all since the moment it began to accumulate energy after Max fused with Unity, would all fully used up in the total 1 minute of using this cheat-like ability. Max had realized that he could use this ability since Fool was essentially a concept, and the Unity energy was an energy at the level of a great old one. Thus, he should at least be able to fool a certain angel and a more terrifying goddess right. And his guess was right, as the energy had begun to be crazily used up the moment Klein appeared. Though the expenditure was insane, it at least meant that once every few years, he would be able to fool the Beander abilities of even gods, or at the very least a king of angels. This will be useful. he thought to himself while continuing his prepared script. All right, Mr. Fool, I do not have much time to talk with you. I will have to leave soon, but we can keep in contact through the Tarot Club. Anyway, I am not here to harm you in any way. All I am here to do is to say one thing. You are not alone, there are others like you. Those who are from a world before this, a world before epics. Those who do not belong to this era. And not all of them are friendly. In fact, most of them are quite the opposite, well other than me, and a certain emperor of course. Well, I hope you keep this conversation secret. Here, keep this for your safety. It'll come in handy, I am sure. With that, Max handed a pitch-black ring with hints of gold gleaming through the darkness. As Klein looked down, Max took this chance to quickly substitute himself with the paper figuring he had long prepared and placed outside the cemetery, just outside Klein's field of view as it was blocked perfectly by multiple gravestones and trees. He did not stop and continued running like there was no tomorrow, and reached the train station. In the bathroom, Long was waiting with a wooden door on a white chalk unity symbol and 3 candles. Good, now send this back to him and return to a demisol in Backland. Continue as you were doing there. He will give you any further instructions. All right, Tom nodded and waited as Max stepped through the door, and followed his instructions perfectly. Max on the other hand closed the door and looked at his stopwatch and saw he still had a few seconds left, and quickly accepted the door into his Sephiroth, before finally stopping the maddening burning of the unity energy. Phew, finally done with that. Meanwhile, back in the cemetery, Klein's thoughts were in a mess. You are not alone, there are others like you. Those who are from a world before this, a world before epics. Those who do not belong to this era. And not all of them are friendly. In fact, most of them are quite the opposite, well other than me, and a certain emperor of course. Those who are from a world before this, the world before epics. Those who do not belong to this era. What does that mean? Well, considering he talked about the emperor, who can only be Russell, he must have been talking about being a reincarnator from Earth from where I, Joe Mingrui, reincarnated. And he said I am not alone. Well, Emperor Russell's diary does indeed prove that. But then he said most of these people are not friendly towards me, other than himself and the emperor. So, he is also a reincarnator. But that also means that there are others. Now why would so many of us get reincarnated into this god-forsaken world? And what was with those disgusting pulsing black veins all over Mr. Death's body? I suppose we will have a proper conversation on Monday, since the previous one for September 10th was cancelled by the other members since they had things to do. After putting those thoughts out of his mind, Max looked back at the almost healed hole in his chest and muttered with a rueful smile, it looks like there are still some secrets behind my transmigration. But it seems like I'll only be able to resurrect another 2 times at most, not anymore. And if I were to minced up or completely crushed, who knows if this recovery ability that doesn't usually appear would even be useful. After half a minute, Klein buttoned his suit and realized that he was wearing his newest shirt and tuxedo, but they were now covered in soil and dirt. Benson and Melissa really have no idea how to save money, the thought popped into his head. He supported his weight on his hand and flipped up into a standing position, realizing that he still had his clown abilities. The best elder brother, the best younger brother, the best colleague. Klein looked at his tombstone and read the inscription. He felt his heart wince, seemingly sensing the despondent feelings Melissa and Benson had experienced. Meanwhile, on Independence, nothing to hide, Max groaned as he returned to his body after sacrificing the door back to the amalgamation of all. The constant bulging black veins all over his body were gradually receding. This was, what he could only assume to be, the side effect of pulling in and using up so much unity energy in such a short period of time. So, using unity energy is like sending electricity through a wire. If the wire is not conductive enough, the wire itself will act as a resistor and heat up, to the point it might even melt and break. The circuit. Well, I don't intend on being melted anytime soon. I should avoid actual contact with Klein unless I really need to. After a while of groaning in pain, the black veins completely vanished, leaving Max with nothing but large amounts of sweat all over his body. Haha, but just fooling her gaze for a few seconds was enough to halfway digest my potion. That is actually insane. Max laughed internally, but also in relief and laid on the rather coarse bed, as the pain went away, leaving him with only a sense of cuporia. He was currently in the single-room cottage built by the villagers for him. It was nothing extravagant, but it was a house, with a working door, 4 walls, and a roof. He did not need light because he generally did not stay here during night times. Now which sequence 5 Beander was advancing to sequence 4 in this period of time? Max thought to himself as he began to wonder about how he would complete his advancement ritual. The potion ingredients were mostly there, with just a few supplementary ingredients missing. He had also got a grasp on the acting method for this potion. Though just fooling Beander abilities was a bit crude for an acting method, and would likely involve something more intricate. But the most important thing was finding the perfect location and time to complete his ritual. Of course, he would also need a month at the minimum to plan everything, as well as some time to fully digest the Fool's End potion. At the moment, he was not sure how much digestion fooling normal Beyonders at low sequences would give him, and he would much rather not interact with mid and high sequence Beyonders. As such, the ritual needed to happen at least 2 months later. The first thought that came to his mind was the apotheosis ritual of King George August III, the king of the Lowen Kingdom. He was also the reason for the Backland smog that would arrive in some months' time, as a cover for all the missing cases that were people being used as labor for building his underground mausoleums. Though, his actual ritual would not take place during the Backland smog, much later. And by that time, Klein would have overtaken him by a long shot. If he remained at sequence 8 for such a long time, he would most likely die long before he could actually advance. Perhaps, if he did not get involved with any Beander, and lived in a remote outskirt cottage in some corner of the world, he might actually survive till that point in time. But his acting method relied on Beyonders and his interactions with them. He could not just use normal words for the acting method, but he would actually have to use his own Beander abilities on them for him to digest his potion. As such, he could likely come into contact with countless official and unofficial Beyonders. Hiding away was not an option, especially if one of the other Unity souls like Samuel were to be brought into the world before he became powerful enough. I need another advancement ritual. After a long time of pondering, Max came to the sad realization that the original story did not have a lot of stuff about other Beyonders other than those directly around Klein, or those who had some impact on Klein. As such, he was considerably out of options from Samuel's information. Max himself had distinctly stayed away from the Beander world while he was in Backland, and Unity did not actually have any memories as such, other than the one where he was pushed away from the world by the truck creator. I should go and check up on Cedric Negan. Cedric Negan was the illegitimate older brother of Duke Pallas Negan and Prime Minister Aguessid Negan. He was also more secretly the master of the Knowledge Magister who had all been basically whipped out by the Aurora Order, or so Max had concluded after seeing the scene of their dismembered and butchered bodies. More importantly, he was also a close friend of Old Man Euxis, and based on what Klein had told him in the divination, was the last to see him alive, as well as the one who killed the old man. And so, his next destination was decided as Max got out of bed, having recovered from the fatigue and pain, and cleansed at the pot of water near the bed, for washing up proposes. However, Max saw the silver hair, and more importantly, the bright red eyes and immediately recalled something. As he had been remembering the story of the original text, Max had finally recalled a minor detail from it. These red eyes clearly belong to the Sanguine family, but I don't have any of their characteristics. I'm clearly not from the Moon Pathway, nor am I a Sanguine. Perhaps I may be related to them somehow. I suppose I should go and talk with Emil at the Church of the Earth Mother in Backland later on. Meanwhile, on a train to Backland, Tom smiled as he had just completed the secret mission given to him by the Mister, and was now returning to Backland to meet up with a Demisol and continue to build their Beander organization. The steam train chugged along the steel tracks and Tom observed the scenery flying by. Train was by far the fastest mode of travel on land, and the most efficient as well, connecting towns and cities in almost straight lines with nothing coming in the way. Compared to horse carriages, trains were too superior to even begin to compare. The only problem was the pollution, noise, and costs of running it within a city were just too high, which resulted in there still being a market for horse-drawn carriages. Knock knock. Suddenly, he heard somebody knock twice on the first-class ticket. Max had booked for his own safety. Without waiting for him to respond, the door was opened and 2 middle-aged men and a younger woman entered, all wearing black windbreakers. The woman lifted up a mirror and turned around, looking at Tom through its reflection. Oddly enough, she kept on clicking her tongue in a repetitive pattern. "You were right, boss," she said as she put away the mirror, but did not stop clicking her tongue. "Can I help you?" Tom asked, but the grip around the dagger under his right sleeve became tighter. This was something Max had taught both Ademisal and Tom, to keep them safe from random thugs, and to possibly help out in situations like these. Mr. Tom, we are here to ask you a few questions. We are from the police, you don't have to worry, the woman said with a faintly terrifying smile on her face that unnerved Tom greatly. In his mind, he silently began to pray to the primordial unity while trying to stall for time. Well, you don't seem like any law enforcement that I know of, Tom countered as he remained vigilant, though he had calmed down from the original state of panic. If somebody was here to harm him, they would not have given him so much time to think and would have likely directly attacked him. He suddenly recalled a description that Max had given them, about a certain group of official Beyonders. Wait, are you three, by any chance, related to the Nighthawks? The three people looked at each other before turning their gazes to the man in the middle, who simply nodded in confirmation. Immediately, a lot of the tension on Tom's body vanished as he relaxed and gestured to the three. Nighthawks, please sit, ask away, I have nothing to hide. In a place filled with darkness, hidden from most of reality, a faint voice was heard. What was that? I'm sure I had been keeping an eye on him since he arrived, but, for a brief moment, I actually could not see him perfectly. Was it the little angel? No, he cannot hide things from me. I should pay more attention to him. Let's get the Nighthawks to increase surveillance of Backland, just to be sure, the voice mused before falling back into silence. This is the end of the mass release. Happy Mother's Day. I know this is a bit late, but I hope all children reading this have wished their mothers a happy Mother's Day. Be it in grief or joy, be it in life or death, be they good mothers or not, they were still those who brought you into the world, and I think they deserve some appreciation for that. All in all, thank you all for reading the chapter. Next mass release will be at 558k views. Depending on how long it will take to reach that figure, the number of chapters for the mass release will vary. But overall, it still takes me time to write, sorry about that. Train to Whitecliff. 5G, September 16, 1349 of the 5th epoch. Max was currently on a train from Backland, that was heading towards Daisy Bay. He had received the prayers from Tom yesterday, and he had assured him that the Nighthawks were generally good people, generally. Still, he could not intervene with the official Beyonders just yet, if he wanted to move around freely. As such, he just ensured Tom's safety every now and then, and instead made Ademisal bring over the door and allow Max to return to Earth from there, before sending it back. And from here he had given a few instructions on how Ademisal was to live now that Tom was essentially missing before heading off to Daisy Bay on a steam locomotive. He quickly leaned back in his first-class seat, entered the amalgamation of all and checked up on Tom. As it turned out, he was still being interrogated back at the headquarters of the Church of Evernight, though Max could only barely see the world around Tom, since the ring and all of his belongings had been confiscated. The only thing Max was using to spy on the poor fellow was his connection to the amalgamation of all, and his brand as a follower of the primordial unity. Still, it was enough for him to hear the stupid conversation that had been going on inside the interrogation room for the past few hours almost on repeat. Who are you? Well, as I have mentioned to multiple people already, I am Tom. No surname because I was never given one. Before you ask again, I am from Tingen. Never knew my parents, never want to get to know them either. Age, no idea, but from what I can remember, and guessing I can't remember at least 3 years of my life since I was born, I suppose I am around 13, give or take a few. Let me get to the main point. What are you doing making so many trips to and from Tingen? How did you get the money for so many first-class tickets? And how did you become a Beyonder? Do you want me to answer those in order or? In order, then it becomes difficult. You see, I will need to explain how I became a Beyonder first. Then why did you ask? Well, I am tied to a metal chair using metal cuffs, in a dark room with unknown people randomly coming to interrogate me every few minutes, repeating the same questions to see if I give a different answer to prove that I am lying. I suppose I wanted to change things up a bit. Anyways, it all began when my brother, he is not truly my brother by relation, but we are just that close. Anyways, it all began when he bumped into an unknown person. And so, Tom repeated almost everything that happened truthfully, except for the part where they were to pray to the primordial unity. Plus, he truly did not know Max's name, so he just called him Mr. Outside the interrogation room, 3 Nighthawks were observing the entire conversation silently. I am telling you, we should just let Harry use dream invasion on him and figure out if he is telling the truth or not. The woman, who was the same one from the train and one of the three responsible for bringing Tom in for questioning, said. Their team had been assigned to look after suspicious activities before and after the incident in Tingen a few days ago, and Tom's odd traveling through the railways was one of the first things that caught their eyes. We will let Ashbourne finish with this round of interrogation before letting him go and checking him out in the night when his guard is down. I will go personally. Boss Harry, I knew it. You were suspicious of him too. No, I am not actually. I am doing this solely to prove you wrong and prove his innocence. I think that he will likely join us Nighthawks soon enough. Max returned to his body and sighed. Things were already getting difficult in Backland. Thankfully, he had already escaped and was on his way to Daisy Bay to meet a long-lost relative. He could have taken an airship, which was a lot faster. But the list of requirements before being able to procure a ticket was simply too long, and it was rather easily tracked to him. Instead, using a train with a fake ID was a lot safer option, despite it taking a lot longer in comparison. Plus, he did not directly head over to Daisy Bay. Instead, he stopped over at Whitecliff Town where one of the ingredients he needed for his next potion was being auctioned soon. At least that was what the letter from Ms. Justice he had received from his company had said. Whitecliff Town. The town itself was not very large in terms of the size of the population, but it was still a lot bigger than the villages in Independence. Max did not waste much time, and after renting out a room for 2 nights, he headed straight for the auction house of the town, one of the few places in the town that ran throughout the day and night, and one of the few sources of external income for the town that was a lot smaller than Tingen. 1 ticket for tomorrow's auction, please. Something more private if you will, Max said while sliding £5 through the window opening to the cashier, whose eyes almost immediately brightened up at the incredibly luxurious spending of this young man. After advancing to Sequence 8, Max's physique had improved a bit, reaching adulthood. He looked like someone who had just crossed into their 20s, with even a bit of facial silver hair being visible. Taking the ticket, he returned to the room he had rented and checked up on Tom since it was already reaching nighttime, and the Nighthawks would likely investigate him in the same way they did to Klein and so many others, through their dreams. Nightmare and letters. Tom was long asleep when he heard a faint voice bringing him out of his deep sleep. Tom, wake up, it's important. He got out of bed, only to realize that his bedroom had been filled with thick black goo, extending from his own body in all directions. The tentacle-like protrusions continued to extend until it fully covered his entire room, making everything pitch black. This is the same stuff that Mr. and the Primordial Unity use in Castle Black. After coming to that conclusion, he calmed down rapidly and looked around silently, waiting for something to happen. Little one, you are under a Beander ability of the sleepless pathway used mainly by Nighthawks. You are currently asleep, and the Nighthawks will be here to interrogate you in your dream, which is here. I will not be there to save you from all Beander abilities all the time, but I will make an exception this once since you reached this situation while helping my chosen one. Answer all their questions in a slight state of confusion and sluggishness, to make your act seem real. Now go forth and flourish, little one. The magnetic voice rapidly vanished, and so did the black substance that retreated into his body. His eyes turned completely black for an instant before returning to normal. Then, he saw a blurry figure in the window, who knocked a bit before letting himself in without any issues. Max observed the entire situation and sighed in relief when the Nighthawk left without any issues, even thanking Tom's dream self for his cooperation like an actual policeman. Perhaps he was a policeman before being roped into the Nighthawks. Max shrugged internally as he left the amalgamation of all and returned to his body, before finally getting some sleep. The next day would be very intensive. September 17, 1349 of the 5th epoch. Max woke up and did a bit of exercise. His new body made him a bit taller, reaching 6 feet, while also increasing the muscles on his body. This made it difficult for him to accurately use his body in combat, which was why he was exercising daily to quickly get used to the slightly taller and more mature body. He even had to change into another set of clothes. Thankfully, Max had prepared for the possibility of his body growing a lot taller, or regressing in age and becoming smaller, or even just randomly growing fat, and kept a good amount of extra clothes with him. After taking a quick shower, Max looked at himself in the mirror, and finally realized that the scar on his right eye had faded considerably. It was still visible, but only in good lighting conditions. After a quick breakfast at the inn next door, Max went ahead and began to write some letters. One was to Mrs. Dunant, who was now responsible for handling the human resources of the Dunant's department store. Another was to the current CEO, who had been brought in by Mrs. Hall to handle the investment for Audrey. Max had given them a bunch of instruction on how to proceed in the future and where to expand. Essentially, he had instructed them not to buy any land in Backland yet, and to instead try and spread out into other cities. Now that they had gained enough staff, and enough funds, they could begin expanding into other cities of the Lowen Kingdom. Of course, this process could definitely not be rushed, and would require a long time of negotiations with landowners and businessmen in those cities, and a delicate handling of interests for the endeavor to be successful. Another letter was directed to Mrs. Hall, mainly to keep her involved in his plans of expansion, as well as to thank her for her continued support of the company. One extra letter was directed to Audrey Hall, thanking her for the location of the auction for his item. Of course, this one was not signed by Max Verstappen, but rather by Mr. Death. Even the handwriting was in Samuel's handwriting, with a different pen and paper used for the same, just to be sure. Lastly, he would be sending the first few letters from Daisy Bay, while he would send Audrey's letter from Whitecliff Town. After that, he realized it was getting a bit later, as he had spent quite some time writing letters. Considering he did not have any of the tools required to erase mistakes made by ink, it took him a few hours to get everything written out properly. It was already nearing the time for the Tarot Club, and Max casually put all the materials inside his briefcase and laid back in his chair. Unknowingly, a smirk appeared on his face, thinking about the rather interesting chat he was going to have with the main character. Tarot Club 12th meeting, in an underground basement under a rather exquisite church, Backland. All right, Tom, you have 3 options in front of you. We have already confirmed your identity, and confirmed your words to be true. However, we cannot just leave an unofficial Beander to roam the streets of Backland. As such, you will have to either be placed in a Beander ability suppressive cell here, let us try and remove the Beander ability from you and erase your memory, or join the Nighthawks as one of its official members. The middle-aged Nighthawk slapped 3 filed onto the table, each of them having a thick stack of papers inside. I would like to add a word of caution. The second option is insanely unsafe, with a success rate of just around 10%. The best possibility in case of failure is death. Other than that, even the memory extraction can result in things like you going insane or losing all memories. Well, so my option are to either be jailed for merely existing, go through 2 operations that are most definitely deadly. Or worse, the man added in, as though trying his best to move Tom away from the second option. Or worse, or join the Nighthawks and put my life on the line without any benefit. We do offer a hefty salary, a generous compensation package, and really good fringe benefits. I was given a lot of money to survive in Backland by Mr. Sigh, what kind of twisted B** starred is this Mr.? He made such a small child a Beander, but then made sure to give them enough knowledge about the Beander world, and money to survive on their own. What does he want exactly from Tom? The middle-aged Nighthawk sighed internally, before adding in. From what we understand, you follow the hunter pathway, correct? Tom nodded silently. We can offer the recipe for the sequence 8 of it, as long as you work diligently for us. And even the next sequences can be sourced. I already have the formula for sequence 8 and 7. And no, I will not sell them to anyone, so don't worry about it. However, what I could use are scaled artifacts. Something to keep me safe. Nope, impossible. Do you even know the paperwork for just lending out an artifact? Plus, I cannot lend it to you without proper reason. Then what about allowing me to become a bodyguard of some important figure after a few cases as a Nighthawk? You know, a safer job. I would still be working for the Nighthawks, but I would be safer after learning what to stay away from and what to look out for as a Nighthawk. The middle-aged man frowned for a while, before nodding. All right, we solved the case of the kidnappings in Tingen. I will assign you a long-term bodyguard mission for at least a few years. But you will have to return to us in case they do not like you, or trust you. All right then, I accept being a Nighthawk. Good. Then first things first, we will check your close combat, gun combat, and Beander ability proficiency before assigning you to the kidnapping case. Are you talking about the time my friend was kidnapped? Yes, the place in Tingen. If you meet the standards, you will join us in traveling to Tingen as part of the temporary replacement force to handle things in Tingen for a week or so until a proper replacement is set up. There, we will be investigating mainly regarding the missing people. Replacement. That is above your pay grade. Anyways, suit up, we are going to test your skills first. It was now that the young lady barged into the room with a sh*t-eating grin on her face as she cracked her knuckles. Klein took 4 steps counterclockwise and arrived above the gray fog. He sat in the high back chair belonging to the fool before extending his spirituality and touching the crimson star that symbolized the sun as if he was responding to a prayer. This is one of the few things in my new life that hasn't changed, he suddenly sighed. In an area outside of the City of Silver, in a grayish-black tower that was half collapsed, 9 members of a patrol squad were gathered around a blazing bonfire, chatting about their experiences in the past few days. There were also a few other team members guarding the perimeter, prepared for any possible attacks that might break out from the darkness. Many of the City of Silver's Beyonders had used their blood to teach them a lesson: at all times, never let your guard down. The monsters in the darkness could very well be right behind you. On a night when the frequency of lightning was very low, it was necessary to keep the flames burning and the light shining. Once they were completely enveloped in darkness, it wasn't impossible for them to all disappear. No one could say for sure just what terrible things would happen in total darkness, because reality had broken the limits of their imagination time and time again. Derek Berg remained reserved and silent as he quietly listened to his companions reminiscing about the monster they had encountered before. It was a humanoid monster with eyes covering its entire body. In order to finish off the monster, their patrolling team suffered a heavy price with 5 injured, and 2 of them severely injured. Suddenly, Derek's vision blurred, and he felt himself being enveloped in a thick gray mist. In an inexplicably faraway place, in the depths of the gray fog, a blurry figure sat on an ancient high-backed chair, looking down at him. "Prepare for the gathering," the fool's voice echoed in Derek's ears, but none of his teammates were aware of it. After withdrawing his gaze and observing the area for more than 10 seconds, Derek moved to the very edge of the fire, leaned against the broken wall, and pretended to be asleep. Ever since he found out that the members of the 6-member council and Elder Lovia were unable to discover the existence of Mr. Fool, he gradually believed that as long as he didn't carelessly reveal any clues, he would be able to quietly attend the tarot club's gathering above the gray fog even under the gaze of others. Backland, Empress Burrow. Using the excuse that she was tired, Audrey returned to her bedroom. She curbed her excitement and didn't pace back and forth. Instead, she sat quietly on the bed, waiting for Mr. Fool's summoning. Father was busy communicating with the other members of Parliament about the proposed bill, and the Beander Guard wasn't tailing me constantly. Thank you, Goddess, my life has finally returned to normal. 2 weeks have passed. Mr. Hanged Man must have prepared the pituitary gland of a mature rainbow salamander. I'm about to advance to sequence 8. Audrey thought with sparkling eyes. To her, this was even more exciting and worth looking forward to than the £30,000 bounty and the large plantation worth at least £8,000. Finally, she saw the familiar illusory crimson surge towards her like a tidal wave, drowning her. On an ancient-looking sailboat, Alger Wilson locked the door to the captain's cabin and sat behind a sextant and the ship logs. He kept memorizing the contents of the thick stack of sheets in front of him. After the investigations, he left the bustle of Backland without any qualms after being rewarded by the upper echelons and returned to the sea, carrying a batch of secretly copied Russell diary pages. After digesting the Seafarer potion, I'll be able to advance normally. My contributions are enough for me to trade for the formula and ingredients. However, this will expose the fact that I know the acting method. There are advantages and disadvantages. Alger shook his head, suddenly distracted. At that moment, he felt the summoning of the fool. His mind suddenly recalled the face of Rear Admiral Hurricane Kilongos, whose flesh and blood quickly rotted as pieces of his face peeled off. Alger instinctively lowered his head, allowing the crimson tide to engulf him. Above the gray fog, inside the palace, it looked like a giant's residence. Having activated his spirit vision, Klein examined Justice, the Hanged Man, and the Sun to confirm their current states. He then finally turned his gaze to Death and noticed he had a slight smirk on his face. Klein actively suppressed the urge to question him, and instead silently waited. Audrey was about to happily greet everyone when she suddenly saw the Hanged Man gesturing to her before rushing to speak before her. Mr. Fool, I've obtained 19 pages of Russell's diary this time. Here, I must thank you for sending your adorer to help me get rid of Kilongos. These diary pages will be the compensation I should pay. 19 pages, not bad. Klein didn't talk much about the adorer as he smiled faintly. That is the principle of equivalent exchange. As expected of Mr. Fool. A pirate admiral with a mystical item was nothing to him. From the looks of it, I don't have to mention my claiming of the bounty. I wonder how many high-sequence Beyonders Mr. Fool has as his adorers. Audrey had begun to use the word he, him, or his to refer to the fool without realizing it. Upon hearing the fool's answer, Alger said humbly, "The limit of my current memory is 6 pages. Please allow me to give them to you over separate occasions." "No problem." Klein, who was surrounded by thick gray fog, nodded gently. The son Derek looked at the pages that appeared before the hanged man and was very curious about the contents of the diary. With his previous experiences, he believed that the items that Mr. Fool was interested in definitely contained many mysteries. He looked at Miss Justice, and when he saw that she didn't have the impulse to ask, he cautiously maintained his silence. Soon, the 6 pages of the diary were complete and came into Klein's hands. Audrey and the others began to wait quietly. They were already used to such things. Klein looked down and read the first page. 16th December. I managed to contact the pathetic fellow who was trapped in the storm and was lost in the darkness. Finally, there's a follow-up to one of the previous pages of the diary. Klein was delighted, and he became more focused. He called himself Mr. Door and tried to teach me a complicated and difficult ritual. He wanted me to help him return to the real world and promised to fulfill 3 of my requests. Does he think I'm stupid? I've lived for more than 60 years over my 2 lives. Does he think I can't tell that this is the usual manipulation done by evil gods and devils? But the history of the 4th epoch that he described was truly interesting. Mr. Fool, Max observed, and Klein continued to read the pages, almost completely engrossed in them. Somehow, he still retained enough peace of mind to maintain his composure in front of the people present. And yet, he completely forgot about Max, and the conversation he so desperately wanted to have with him. Putting down the 6 diary pages, Klein tapped his right index finger on the edge of the long bronze table, slowly moving his gaze from Miss Justice to the hanged man, and then to the sun. Right, in the diary just now, there was a line Emperor Russell described, God who created all the deities, an omnipotent and omniscient God. This is very similar to the customs of the City of Silver. Where did he hear this from? Could it be from that most ancient and secret organization which controls the world from behind the scenes? This organization was established before the forsaken land of the gods was forsaken. Suddenly, Klein had a new idea. He said with a low and gentle smile, Russell mentioned some hidden history in his diary, and mentioned some simple general knowledge. The latter reminded me of something that I don't recall informing you all. Audrey suddenly fell into a trance. She immediately turned her body around and looked at the very top of the ancient long table in pleasant surprise. Mr. Fool is taking the initiative to mention the contents of Russell's diary. What would it say? She was so excited and thrilled that she completely forgot that she was a spectator. Compared to her, the hanged man, Alger, was much more composed. However, the subconscious straightening of his back hardlessly betrayed him. Only the son, Derek, had always believed that the items of interest to Mr. Fool contained many mysteries, but he didn't know anything about Emperor Russell and didn't know what this name represented in the northern continent. Thus, he just found it difficult to hide his curiosity and didn't reveal any unusual behavior. Mr. Fool, did Emperor Russell mention some general knowledge? I'm willing to pay for this information, Audrey couldn't help but say. However, I want it to be communicated to me privately. She added silently in her heart. Klein chuckled and said, there's no need. This is very simple general knowledge. After reading this part of the diary, as the summoner of the Tarot Club, I feel it's necessary to let all of you know this. Of course, I'm very certain that some of you are already aware of this. He was mainly referring to the sun. The City of Silver had a history of 2,000 to 3,000 YCARS, so it was impossible for them to not discover the law of Beyonder characteristics indestructibility. Moreover, they were in a relatively extreme environment. Even if the surrounding areas had no lack of monsters in the darkness, there would still be times when they failed to obtain the corresponding materials. In order to pass on their heritage, in order for their city to continue on, using the Beyonder characteristics of the remains of their predecessors to create a potion wasn't particularly unacceptable. To them, this was perhaps a sacred and glorious ceremony. Of course, Klein could see from a previous exchange that the hanged man knew something. It's a pity that Miss Justice cannot always be made to pay in gold pounds and transfer the money to my adorers. My adorer can't appear any less impressive. I mustn't destroy the image of the powerful man that Mr. Azek has created. Yes, I'll give it a try when I have the chance. After all, no matter how powerful a being is, they'll have subordinates that run errands. For instance, the Evernight goddess is sleepless. No one would ever suspect that the Evernight goddess isn't a true deity just because the low-level Nighthawks are weak. Klein sighed silently. Thank you very much, Mr. Fool, you are just too generous. Audrey replied in joy. She was originally feeling 3 seconds of regret for the coarse action of using cash to purchase the information. Klein stopped rapping the table and described with a calm voice, the first piece of general knowledge law of Beander characteristics indestructibility. The characteristics of a Beander is never destroyed or reduced. It's only passed from one carrier to the next. Without realizing it, I used Captain's tone. Klein's lips subconsciously curled upwards. It cannot be destroyed or reduced. It just transfers from one carrier to another. Audrey ruminated over Mr. Fool's description, feeling that there was too much meaning in that simple sentence. Her emerald green eyes turned, and when she saw that neither the Hanged Man, the Sun, nor Death showed any signs of surprise or contemplation, she immediately understood that these two members of the Tarot Club had long known of this law. Only I didn't know, she thought, feeling somewhat aggrieved, but she quickly began to praise Mr. Fool for his kindness. At this point, Klein added, after a Beander dies, they will leave behind an item of Beander characteristics. It could be the main ingredient, or it could be a mystical artifact that requires sealing. An ordinary Beander's death results in similar results. However, the item left behind will be equivalent to the corresponding potion without the supplementary ingredients. Of course, the item alone will contain Beander powers. They can be used as a half-mystical object. The plain and indifferent words instantly echoed in Audrey's mind. Layers stacked upon layers and, bit by bit, it eventually reached a crescendo. Audrey thought of cannibalism and the question, would a sequence pathway be severed if the source of Beander materials ceased to exist? She had asked the Hanged Man previously came to mind. Now, she knew the answer, but she would have rather not heard it. She felt like she was having a nightmare. How can it be so cruel? Why is it so dark? Audrey had previously seen some bad situations that involved Bevenders, but those situations were only caused by a person's own perverse and evil nature. While Audrey was having her mental breakdown and recovering what was left of her worldview, Klein finally noticed Max, who was just sitting there with a casual smirk on his face, making his heart skip a beat. He quickly recalled the conversation and the plan he had in place to deal with this fellow. Most importantly, he was sure that he had not activated the Crimson Star connecting to Mr. Death, hoping to contact him after the Tarot Club to have a proper conversation. How did he even get into this castle? Alarm bells sprang off in Klein's mind, but he maintained his composure on the surface and continued in a calm tone. The second piece of general knowledge, law of similar sequence Beander characteristics conservation. Law of similar sequence Beander characteristics conservation. The Hanged Man slightly changed his sitting posture. He felt that he understood something, but he was unable to fully understand what this law represented and what it consisted of. Justice and the Sun shared the same feelings as he did. They were unable to directly understand the true meaning behind this law. Why similar sequence? Alger couldn't help asking. Klein smiled, in a surprisingly natural way, and replied, what do you wish to pay for the answer? All the while, Max was smiling for a particularly different reason. He had waited till 3, but he had not been summoned, and understood that Klein wanted to keep him away for some reason. Likely to question him separately after the Tarot Club. But he did not want to miss this opportunity to see his shocked face. He first tried to fool the Saphira Castle into bringing him in, but that failed since its sequence was a bit too high for his normal Beander abilities to work. As such, he next tried to use the Unity energy to fool the Saphira Castle, and it was surprisingly possible, but the consumption would be insane, almost as much as when he was fooling Evernight's unconscious attention. Thus, he then tried something interesting. He had noticed the black Unity energy that had been slowly oozing out from behind his seat, and collecting on the floor, almost the point that it touched his legs on the ground. Thus, he used a bit of that energy to directly fool Klein into accidentally touching his Crimson Star to bring him into the Saphira Castle of his own accord. And this had given him a lot of digestion of his potion. Clearly not as much as the goddess, but it was pretty close to what he had received from fooling Azek Eggers, and this was perhaps due to Klein's unnatural connection to the Sephiroth, and how he was inside it and wielding its powers when he was fooled. Though, just this small action had caused nearly 1/3 road of the black Unity energy to be used up in the process. That amount was already around a few months' worth of unity energy from within. Another Sephiroth, wasted away in a largely unnecessary experiment. Though, he at least learned that he could affect things within this Sephiroth, which meant he could do a lot of things in the future, most not beneficial in any way to Klein. In fact, a lot were quite the opposite. But now was not the time for it. Instead, now he had to display his best personality to Klein and hope to become his friend and gain his trust early on. That way, once Klein matures in the future, and becomes the scheming and naturally vigilant person, he would have already infiltrated his inner circle and be able to stab him in the back at the perfect moment after the other Sephiroths were unsealed. Let the games begin. Klein remained slightly slower to answer than usual, but most of the conversation continued as it had in the original text, and Max did not interfere much. They continued to talk about a lot of things, and finally, Klein pushed the idea of the members of the Tarot Club performing a sacrificial ritual, and then he ended the meeting. Though, Max did not leave. Rather, Klein did not push Max's projection out of the Saphira castle. Max still remained silent, and just smiled at Klein, who likewise did not say much, just staring at the ladder and trying his best to see his emotions through the power of the gray fog. Unfortunately, Klein did not have unlimited time to relax in this space and had to get things moving. Thus, he took his chance to break the silence and ask his question first. So, you are a fellow transmigrator? Of sorts. What is more important is that I cannot tell you much due to certain restrictions, which I cannot speak about due to other things I cannot speak about due to reasons I cannot speak about. Quote. So, what can you tell me? Nothing much actually, just a few bits of advice. I know you have been through a lot. I was there when that Nighthawk was killed, and when you were killed. But this world is no longer the Earth you knew of, oh no. It is nowhere even close to that. Here, there is no good and evil. There is only power, and those too weak to seek it. Morality is just a hoax, a false sense of security created by the strong to keep the weak under control and used by the weak to maintain the lies they call lives. Do not fall for it. Clear your mind to not get washed away in the business of the world around you, and instead, lift the veil to see the truth. That is all I can say at the moment. I can keep offering you advice. Well, Mr. Fool, I will contact you by praying to you in case I ever need you. You can also contact me by praying to me in case you need me. All you need to say is, the unity of the time, the almighty singularity, the ruler of the three realms, universal amalgamation of all. That is all for today, he said with a smile on his face before snapping his fingers and vanishing from his spot, leaving behind an absolutely dumbfounded Klein. Unfortunately, this stunt also used up around 1/4 of the unity energy inside the Saphira castic. He would have to wait a long time before actually being able to make use of this energy to infiltrate the Saphira castle, meaning he would have to basically stop using stunts like this one from now on until the time came to take care of Klein. However, Max simply returned to his body, leaned back in his chair and began giggling uncontrollably like a child who had pulled off an incredibly silly prank on someone. In fact, that was just the case. Samuel was not the one who wanted to leave Klein completely dumbfounded, but Max wanted to do it. And surprisingly, for the first time since the moment it had fused with them, Unity sided with Max, causing Samuel to just shrug and let them have whatever they wanted. After they completed the prank, Unity exuded a glaring sense of fulfillment and joy, like a sun on a winter night. This feeling even bled into Samuel and Max, who also felt an amount of joy themselves. Thus, the result was Max giggling like a little child despite looking like a 20-year-old. Meanwhile, Klein was having a mental breakdown trying to comprehend how Mr. Death was a higher being at least at the level of gods. Perhaps, even a level above them considering his honorific name had 4 lines and not 3. He was also incredibly confused about how to deal with Mr. Death, who now knew too much about Klein. But then a few moments later he calmed back down as he realized that he too knew that Mr. Death was a fellow transmigrator, perhaps not from China like himself, but at the very least from the same Earth, or a similar one. Klein sighed and decided to check on a few things before leaving the gray fog. He first divined if Mr. Death had any negative thoughts towards him. And the result came back negative. After thinking for a while, Klein thought of something and came to a frightening conclusion. He closed his eyes and raised the topaz chain into the air once more and repeated the words once more. Mr. Death is the primordial unity. After repeating it 7 times, he opened his eyes only to see the topaz circling rather rapidly in the counterclockwise direction. He told me he was the primordial unity. Either he was lying to me and wants me to contact the god he worships, or he is somehow influencing my divination even while I am in the castle above the gray fog. The thought made cold sweat collect at the back of his neck, but he returned to his senses quickly as he felt he did not have too much time here. Thus, he quickly did a few more divination like Mr. Death is an old man above the age of 90 or Mr. Death is not a girl, and they all came back negative. What have I gotten myself into? He cursed inwardly as he was pushed back to his body from the foggy castle, and he proceeded with his day as usual, trying his best not to think about the primordial unity. Unfortunately for him, Max, who was rather happy by the sudden increase in digestion of his potion, despite the slight usage of the rapidly recovering unity energy in his Sephiroth, frowned as he heard a new set of thoughts enter his mind, despite the filtering from the amalgamation of all. Focusing on it, he found it to be Klein, and his thoughts were nowhere near what Max had wanted them to be. *T. I was too impulsive, damn it, he cursed inwardly while having some tea, until he calmed down after downing the entire glass. Well, if he assumes me to be a hostile god, it's all right. At least some of his divinations should be regarding the truth behind me, right? I will get digestion, just not his trust. Change of plans. What is done is done. We can't change his memories because we are not there, and also because I'm pretty sure his memories are linked to the Saphira Castle. Doing anything will result in us having to either beat off a Sephiroth, or worse yet, battle with him, Samuel added, causing Max to frown. Come on Max, come up to the amalgamation of all. Just in case. Sure. As soon as his mind entered the Sephiroth, a flood of hidden memories entered his mind, and his frown gradually turned upside down. This is perfect. We will be able to work with this. Maintaining a safe distance from him would help us get along with Eamon, maybe even Adam until the time is right. Plus, as long as he thinks about us, even in the Saphira Castle, we will be able to spy on him. This will be fun. Max smiled as he removed the memories from his mind once more and returned to his body. Let the games begin. Samuel smiled as he observed Max get ready for the auction. End of mass release. The next mass release will be when we hit 602k views. In case you guys do not know, views are very odd in web novel. Power stones and comments also give views for some reason, but it only happens once per person. So do not sit down to spam comments, because it only gives the equivalent of 1 or at best 2 comments. Though, I would appreciate comments criticizing the work, and helping me find problems and perhaps even solutions to those problems so I can improve my work. If you have something negative to say, do say it, but also give reasons for that. Like, don't just say, lol, it's so bad I would rather read MTL than this *T, and instead say something like, lol, it's so bad, I would rather read MTL than this. The grammar is subpar, with a lot of spelling mistakes. There are also plot holes in this where me does action, and results in reaction when the actual should have been reaction to *, or something along the lines. Please explain why you feel a certain way so I can improve. Thank you. Auction. Max yawned as he observed items appear and being sold in the auction. Although the town was small, there were still quite a few travelers like Max, many of who came to this town specifically to participate in this auction. Thus, the prices of many items went several times higher than their market price. The clash of egos, mostly from the rich few either for themselves, or to impress others, he mocked internally until his item finally came on. Here we have an extremely rare item. It is the talon of a silver-feathered falcon, a rumored descendant of the mighty silver dragons. This talon has passed through countless hands until it has finally arrived here, waiting for the fated one to purchase it to add to their collection, or use for other mysterious purposes. The host, who was a rather charming elderly man with gray hair but a fit physique, winked comically at the audience, leaving the latter part of his sentence to the imagination of the audience. Some ladies in the audience blushed, while some gentlemen simply began laughing out loud, what they imagined would forever remain in their minds. Still, Max knew most people would not have mysticism on their minds, at least not here. Perhaps if the auction was in Backland, there may have been a good amount of beyonders to avid mysticism collectors interested in this. Max waited as the price rose from just a few pounds, to a considerable £200. Ultimately, he placed a £250 bid and successfully won the item since the others immediately got the signal that he was willing to pay a lot to get this item, and on the off chance he decided to give up, they would have to fork over an insane amount for such an item. Now, should I leave immediately, or should I stay just in case something interesting comes up? After a while of pondering, Max decided to stay and observe. Time continued to pass, and Max went over to the amalgamation of all, and checked up on the situation on Independence. As it turned out, things were going rather well. Mark, the one who had lost all his family to the giant boar, decided to become a missionary, and take on the mission to spread the holy faith of the primordial unity to other villages, hopefully at least bringing in one person per village to become a priest, and at least set up a rudimentary church in each village. Meanwhile, the villagers had recovered considerably from the event and had got back to their ways. Max had given them knowledge, and he had also given quite a few of them access to the church headquarters. As soon as these few had seen the mighty presence of the primordial unity, they had all become fervent believers, almost at the same level as Mark the missionary. Thus, they maintained contact while Mark set off for the nearby village, while the original boar village, as Max renamed it in his mind, had begun to rapidly grow in various ways. Firstly, Max had explained to them some important technologies related to farming, to rapidly improve crop quality and productivity, while also giving them a bit of technology for improving their homes. He also put up quite a bit of such technology for exchange, requiring contributions to the church for being able to exchange this information. Contribution would be earned by bringing in believers, improving the living standards of believers, and following orders given by the primordial unity. Of course, at the moment, nobody had any contributions, but Mark was sure to gain quite a few on his journey. Suddenly, an item was called out which caused Max to nearly jolt in his seat as he became incredibly serious. It was not because of the name, but rather because of the spiritual energy he could sense from it. He quickly closed his eyes and prayed to the Mother Goddess of Depravity and found himself floating above the red moon once again. So, what should I do with this? He asked in slight confusion. Max no longer had too many scruples about this outer deity and former pillar. He had already seen how she had protected him from a certain psychopathic pen, and how the Wanderer's key had helped him so much. She was clearly helping him grow, and become a great old one. All right, but I want something in return. Yes, I know. I have already received a lot from you, and have not helped you in any way. I will do so once I am strong enough. You know it too, which is why you have been helping me since the beginning. I just want to know one thing. Were any of you outer gods, or just overall any great old ones involved in the death of the old man Euxis? His real name is Ural Vase. All right, thank you. I will ensure to pass this on to Backlund, you don't have to worry. After that, Max returned to his body and instantly bid £100 for an item that was still being bid at £3, causing the entire hall to fall into silence. Unfortunately, this time around, somebody actually bid against Max, and it was clearly a hostile bid to make him lose money rather than get them the item. £101, £150, Max added without hesitation. He already had gained a lot of money over time and had withdrawn a lot of his savings to ensure he would have been able to get the ingredient he wanted. Unfortunately, he had already spent £250 on the first item he wanted, and he only had £300 left. £151. Max frowned and added with a heavy heart, while also secretly using his Beander powers to observe the one who was bidding against him. As it turned out, it was a lady, who seemed to be sprawled all over a fat but clearly wealthy man. What surprised him more was the fact that she was a Beander. Most likely of the demoness or assassin pathway, considering how she was trying actually do nothing, but the man seemed to be in great pleasure. This meant she was most likely a Sequence 6 pleasurer. She could also be of another pathway with similar abilities, or resulting outcomes, like the Sequence 9 apothecary who could create potions with similar effects. If it is the former, things will get difficult. But I have already promised, and anti-divination should be able to keep me safe as long as I escape her physical pursuit. Well then, I suppose the time has come to digest a bit more of my potion. Max smiled as he got up and left the room, preparing to take his Beander ingredient first and sacrifice it to Unity to keep it safe before thinking of a suitable plan to retrieve the wooden box that had the Mother Goddess spirituality all over it. But it is strange, how come she did not lose control? And neither did any of the people here suddenly mutate into vicious monsters or explode, or implode, or even feel mild discomfort. I should investigate it once I get my hands on the box. Max was now more focused on this incident since he had received news from the Mother Goddess herself that no outer gods were involved in the old man's death. This meant the higher level of power involved were gods in the worst case, which made it possible for him to somehow escape at the very least in case anything went wrong with the investigation on Cedric Negan. Popular. In the alley a few buildings from the Whitecliff Town's auction hall, Max stood in his signature white three-piece suit. He was also wearing white gloves and a white bandana to cover most of his face, just in case somebody saw him. In his head, Samuel was so excited to finally see some Beander-on-Beander action that he began humming the tune of a song that Max himself also began humming to. I've seen the devil, down Sunset, A, in every place, A in every face, D, yeah, yeah, Soon enough, he saw a carriage pull up to the auction house and the lady he had seen along with the far old man got into the carriage. Moments later, they were followed by a bellboy bringing up a considerably hefty chest and putting it onto the back of the carriage, before getting on himself and sitting next to the chest, holding onto it as though his life depended on it. Tell me, do you see her? Yeah, she's living her life, even if she acts like she don't want the limelight, yeah, Max pulled out his gold pocket watch and confirmed the time before putting it away and grinning. The train to Daisy Bay would be leaving in just a few minutes. Meaning he did not have much time to get from here to there as it was, never mind a chest of this size. But if you knew her, yeah, she lives a lie. She calls the paparazzi, then she acts surprised, oh. But he had a plan, so he dashed out while using the newly recovered unity energy from the amalgamation of all to fool the Beander's senses, sneak past her and cleanly arrived at the back of the carriage. Oh, I know what she needs, oh. She just want the fame, I know what she fiends, oh. However, he could not fool a normal person, and the bellboy who was sitting outside at the back of the carriage had noticed Max and was just about to yell. Give her a little taste, runnin' back to me, oh. Put it in her veins, pray her soul to keep, ooh. Unfortunately for the poor soul, one knife found its way into his throat, preventing him from saying anything, while another found its way into the side of his head, killing him on the spot without too much pain. Every night, she prays to the sky Z. Flashin' lights is all she ever wanted, yeah. Max pulled back his knives and tucked them into his suit, careful not to stab himself. He had not gotten onto the carriage yet, and doing so would greatly alter the weight distribution of the carriage itself, and someone with enhanced senses like a Beander from the assassin pathway would definitely realize. Beggin' on her knees to be popular. That's her dream, to be popular, hey. As such, he simple placed a palm on the dead bellboy, and another on the chest, and perfectly transferred the weight to the body, while making sure the body would not fall off anytime soon. Kill anyone to be popular, Sell her soul to be popular. And with that, he pulled out the now weightless chest, and began running with it, as his unity energy was still being rapidly depleted to fool her Beander senses from noticing him, and her Beander abilities into preventing her normal senses from noticing him. Popular, just to be popular, Everybody scream 'cause she popular, hey. Max continued running until he reached the same alley he was in before, where 3 lit candles were placed in an oddly drawn circle. Here he placed the chest and closed his eyes, and moments later, the chest and the drawn circle vanished, leaving only 3 extinguished candles. She mainstream 'cause she popular. Never be free 'cause she popular. Max hummed the tune as he picked up the candles and ran along the silent night street in the opposite direction of the carriage, towards the train station headed to Daisy Bay. By now, the train would have already begun leaving, but as all steam trains did, it would take some time to get up to speed. In the meantime, Max took off his white suit, bandana, and everything else and sacrificed it, instead bringing down another set of gray clothes to look less like a rich prick and more like a normal upper-middle-class individual. Even the knives were scarified to the amalgamation of all to prevent any evidence from ever being found. Running out of the alleyway near the train station, Max continued running, but this time he had a top hat that he held onto while running, and a small briefcase, looking like the perfect example of a gentleman who was running late for a train, and not someone who was running away from a murder. Warning and Cedric Negan, September 19, 1349 of the 5th epoch. Audrey, who had only recently advanced to Sequence 8, telepathist of the visionary or reader pathway, held onto the letter she had received from her butler with hints of joy. This letter had passed through the hands of at least 3 individuals, each of whom had already read the message, and ensured nothing was out of place, including but not limited to checking for death threats, poisons, toxins, and any other dangerous situations before finally reaching her hands. She had already realized that she had been far too naive when she had first joined the tarot club, sending her personal butler to send a message to the Dunnant store. Obviously Mr. Death had traced him back to her and found out her real-life identity. Though, it did not seem to be too big of a deal, since Mr. Death did not seem to be that bad, and he had clearly realized most of her identity from the very first tarot meeting. I wonder why he had written this letter to me. Audrey opened the already opened cover and pulled out the letter, and opening it was a neutral expression. Dear Ms. Justice. The latter was rather simple. It stated that Mr. Death was very thankful for Ms. Justice's help in providing the information regarding the location of the ingredient he wanted. After thanking her, he gave her just one piece of information to act as payment for the information. Of course, physical payment was also there, but such little amount of money did not mean too much to her. Be careful, Ms. Justice. Dangers lurk in every corner. Evil thrives in darkness. Sorrow is brought by disaster, but sometimes, just sometimes, disaster is brought about by sorrow. Not the sorrow of the few, but the sorrow of the many. Be careful, Ms. Justice, for Backland is not as safe as it appears to me. Audrey frowned at the information, as it told her a lot, without actually giving her any real facts. Disaster is brought about by the sorrow of the many, in Backland. It must have something to do with the slums, Audrey quickly calculated while placing the latter on the table for Susie to read, and randomly opened a drawer and chucked in the £30 she had received as payment for the information as though it was some unwanted tissue paper. I suppose it is time for Detective Susie and Detective Audrey to investigate. But father and mother might find out. I should get Furs and Zio to do the investigating for me. Yes, a marvelous plan. One can have them investigate this while conducting Mr. Fool's task. Foo. Audrey smirked while letting out a proud but suppressed laugh, pride in her own deductive and scheming skills. Max got off the train at a small town in Daisy Country, on the coast of Daisy Bay. He glanced at the sun glaring down at them despite it already nearing winter. After all, he was closer to the equator now than before, the climate became less versatile, and the humidity had blasted through the roof. Still, all Max had to do to maintain a cool temperature was simply double the density of the air around his skin for just an instant, enough for the heat from his skin to travel to the thicker and thus more conductive air, before turning it back to normal. He did not stop walking and made his way directly to the shop that Klein had divined Cedric would be at, ignoring everything else around him until he finally made it to a fishing net workshop, mainly used to repair broken fishing nets. It was considerably popular, but Max could not find the old man here at first glance. Thus, he approached the cashier and asked if he knew an old, bald, and scarred man. The female cashier, who was slightly stunned at Max's odd hair color and eyes, mixed with the rather handsome face he had as an adult, quickly came to her senses and thought for a moment before replying in a moment of realization. Of course, we know him. Dean, stop cleaning and come out, you have a visitor. A moment of silence later, nobody came out. Seeing this, the cashier fumed. Dean, get out here right this instant. Or I will tell father. What will you do without a job then? Only then did a frail-looking bald man step out, with overgrown facial hair and even some spots of growing hair on his head, but still mostly bald. It was without a doubt Cedric Negan, but he had lost a lot of weight, mainly muscle mass from the looks of it. He also clearly had not slept too well, and he was missing an arm. Looking at this old man, Max felt only two emotions, curiosity on who did this to him and who killed the old man, and pity. He walked over to him, around the counter, and embraced him in a heartfelt hug. Nice to see you again, you old baldy. The words felt like a jolt of lightning to Cedric, whose lifeless sides began trembling as if they had lost control completely. He silently raised his one remaining hand to Max's head, which was just about his own height, and ruffled his silver-white hair as emotions and memories returned to him. Max, my hoy, is that you? His voice seemed hoarse and frail, like that of a dying man in the desert, suddenly seeing a mirage of water in the distance, knowing that it was likely fake, but desperately grasping onto the faint hope that it was not. Yes, it's me, the kid that old man Euxis took in. Ah, Euxis. Max, one, you need to know something. I know, old man Euxis passed on. Cedric opened his mouth to say something, but no words left his mouth as he just looked into the distance, countless emotions going through his mind, his eyes red from holding back those very emotions. Sometimes, it was okay to cry, and let go of your emotions. But not this time. Cedric had to tell Max some important information, it was also the reason why Euxis had sacrificed himself, so that Cedric could pass on the message to Max. Unfortunately, Cedric never got past the fact that his best friend and comrade in arms for countless years had just vanished, without a trace left behind, which was why Cedric had settled down here. Max, I need to tell you some things. But we will have to go to a more private location. Meanwhile, back in Tingen, Tom got off the train while wearing a top hat and black clothes. Behind him, 3 other individuals got off wearing similar clothes. One was the leader of the group, Harry, who was also the highest sequence Beander at sequence 7 of the Sleepless Pathway, Nightmare. Next was the rather hot-blooded female Beander, Mariah. She was at sequence 8 of the Warrior Pathway, Pugilist. Her pathway was also a reason why she was so enthusiastic about enemies. Next was Ashbourne, the more normal of the group. He was at sequence 9 of the Sleepless Pathway, sleepless and had large bags under his eyes. But other than talking a little slower than others, he seemed to be the most normal of the group, considering the other options were a hot-headed warrior maiden and an uptight boss. And last, there was Tom, who was at sequence 9 of the Hunter Pathway, Hunter. Alright, it's now time to get back at those fools who thought they could get away with kidnapping little Ademisal. Tom adjusted his suit and began walking confidentially. Suddenly, a fast hand grabbed his shoulder, and it immediately felt like he was being stopped by a mountain, completely immovable. Where do you think you're going? We need to report to the local Nighthawk post first. Only then can we carry out our mission. Quote. Tom did not say anything as his show had been abruptly cancelled and all he could do was silently follow the group, with Harry at the head, and Mariah making sure he did not wander away. September 20, 1349 of the 5th epoch. In a small village on the outskirts of the nation Max had named Athens, a middle-aged man with short black hair and streaks of white near the edges took in a deep breath before beginning his sermon to the general public. His eyes were resolute as he portrayed the various miracles performed by the primordial unity through his followers, namely through the high priest who had killed a savage beast the size of 2 houses stacked on top of each other with just a finger and a prayer to the primordial unity. Mark knew this story was ever so slightly exaggerated, but he knew in his heart that the primordial unity was real, and he had witnessed his great presence many times already, while trying to maintain communication with those back in his village. Though, he was surprised when the high priest instructed a family of priests to head over to Sparta, the capital of Athens. This meant that 4 people, the father, mother, and 2 children would be leaving the village, making it even smaller in population than it was before. However, with the new techniques of farming that had been bestowed by the primordial unity, food and other basic resources should not be too much of an issue for even such a small population. Though, any further progress in technology and living standards would require not only more people but also more points with the system created by the primordial unity. Of course, he alone was already carning a steady stream of points, and over time he should be able to exchange them for information that would help the new priests he was making along the way. He then talked about how the high priest had even performed a similar miracle in front of them, before returning to the main point. In the beginning, there was nothing. Let there be light, said a being, splitting himself up into all the countless worlds that exist around us. However, it was not meant to be. Reality was not meant to be stained by the filth of existence and matter. The imbalance in the universe caused the creation of what we today call the primordial unity. The primordial unity is the manifestation of the universe itself, bringing balance back to the reality, bringing everything together, and uniting into nothingness. What we do is the work of the primordial unity. It is merely to spread his name across the lands, and nothing more. We, as priests, do not partake in the greed of wealth or our bodily desires. Fret not, it is not forbidden, as the primordial unity knows that we are only mortals, and mortals have bodily desires that cannot be quenched. He only states that it is to be looked down upon in excess, and I personally do advise to limit such cardinal sins. Remember, betrayal of his faith will not end in simple punishment like death, but a fate far worse than you could possibly even imagine. By constantly switching from praise to scare tactics, which he had picked up over the past few days on his travels, Mark was indoctrinating this entire village to become priests, just like his own village. And just like his own village, Mark had discovered that this village was being attacked by a very powerful beast, and had immediately prayed to the primordial unity. Thankfully, he gave him a diagram which was his own symbol, and a ritual to follow, which led to a door materializing in front of him. Walking through the door was the one and only, the high priest of the primordial unity. Mark had been incredibly shocked at the display of appearing from thin air but quickly calmed down as Max closed the door and made it vanish using the same method he had made it appear. Next, Max quickly moved to the village and saw a large gorilla, about twice as large as the previous boar monster he had killed. This monster, however, clearly seemed intelligent and was not going on a rampage to kill all the humans in the village, and instead making them offer him fruits and other tasty cats as offerings, and in exchange, he would not attack them. Mark noticed Max had slowed down his steps from brisk running to slow walking as he approached the giant ape that was lying down on top of a destroyed building. Thankfully, Mark had already confirmed that nobody had been inside the building a few days ago when the beast first appeared. This world is definitely not normal, then again, this entire universe isn't. But this monster is different from the boar. It is smart. Is it smart enough to submit though? Max had thought to himself while approaching the beast. He did not say anything and instead continued walking until the sleeping beast woke up to the sound of human footsteps, excited for the food, only to be brutally disappointed to see a single human with nothing in his hands. Max stretched out one hand, much to the shock and fear of the residents around him, facing the giant ape with practiced ease and unnerving calm. The giant ape, irritated by the fact that a puny human seemed to be challenging him, raised his hands into the air while forming fists, preparing to punch down at the odd human. However, just at that moment, he heard some words he had never heard before. "Oh, primordial unity, teach this misguided child a lesson to not touch your followers, or those they care about." Suddenly, the giant ape seemingly lost its balance and fell forward, his hands falling with incredible speed and power to his sides, just barely missing Max, who did not move at all, as though he knew they would miss. Then, he began walking once more towards the ape's face that was half buried in the ground and began whispering. Mark did not know what he whispered, but he heard the monkey grunting. In response, Max raised his hand to the first of the monkey, and gripped the air, before pulling his hand towards him. The monkey screeched in pain but could not move, as its bloodied fingernail was ripped out of its pinky finger and floated in front of Max, who brought it to the monkey to let it float in front of its eyes, before whispering something more. Then, the monkey seemed to remain silent and try to nod, causing it to suddenly regain its movement. Instantly, it tried to attack the high priest, and once again, fell to the ground, only to have another one of its nails pulled out. It was a gruesome scene, but since it was not a human, nobody in the village minded. In fact, they were already on the verge of starvation from losing all their food to the ape, so seeing it being treated as such gave them a vain sense of fulfillment. At least that was what Mark had noticed from the few villagers who had exited their houses carefully, with hope in their dull eyes. Then, the process repeated another 3 times, resulting in the monkey having a hand that was completely nail-less and it would likely take a long time to heal. Ultimately, after regaining his movement, the beast no longer attacked the high priest, and instead knelt, raising his palm to the sky. Suddenly, the high priest began floating into the sky, and after reaching the height of the monkey, he placed his palm on it, before floating back down to the ground. The priest then began walking, and the giant ape surprisingly followed behind him obediently. Take care of the villagers here. Many of them have witnessed a miracle and will likely choose to join the church. Allow them. After saying that, the high priest and the giant ape vanished from the village, never to return again. But the miracle left behind by the high priest, nay, the miracle left behind by his primordial unity would never be forgotten. For the primordial unity is the balancing force of the universe itself. 4. The soon-to-be priests all began to follow his words without any doubt, and strong religious fervor burning in their hearts. Diary of the Giant Ape 1. September 19, 1349 of the 5th epoch, on the day of the incident with the giant ape. Giant Ape's Pav. At first I was irritated at having to serve a puny human, but after being treated as he called it, multiple times over, all I could do was give up. But I still planned on escaping from him as soon as I could. We walked and walked for a few hours until the human turned around and spoke the human language that I had come to understand from the inheritance I received upon birth. You will not move from here. If you do, I will hunt you down, and treat you until there is nothing left of you. Do you understand? Shuddering at the thought of having to undergo another treatment, I hurriedly nodded, and he smiled evilly before walking away into the distance. And he did not return for almost a whole day, until I began hearing random noises of trees being broken down and rocks falling on other rocks. Carefully, I walked to the edge of the region he had allowed me to go and peeked forward to see what was going on. However, what I saw through the trees was an absolutely horrifying monster. It looked somewhat similar to the slime king that killed my pack, but horrifyingly worse in every way. Instead of the bright blue of the slime king, this creature was dark gray in color, and instead of being one smooth gelatinous form, it was made up of an incredible number of tentacles constantly wriggling around. Worse yet, there were countless horrifying eyes and teeth randomly spread across the entire creature, along with streaks of pitch black. The creature moved swiftly as it destroyed everything in its path, and then turned back to destroy things that were not originally in its path. Trees were uprooted, not just by their form, but also by a strange force that I felt was very familiar to me. The trees were lifted into the air like they were bird feathers, along with rocks and soil, before everything was thrown back down to the ground with so much more force than it would have had if it was just falling down. Only then did I recall that this was the same energy he had used to pressure me into the ground when we first met, and then the same energy used to lift the materials was used to give me that torturous treatment. Then, among the horrifying destruction and worse realization I came to, I heard some words the creature was speaking. "Damn it, Cedric, your fault, unspoken, why, you should have known better." The last was the only line he could clearly make out, and he was thoroughly confused as to what it had meant. However, I noticed that after almost destroying everything in front of me, and half an hour of pure carnage, the creature seemed to have calmed down and its body slowly began to fuse together, becoming smaller and smaller until it took the vague shape of a human. Then, it formed a naked human, and it was him. I knew it, he was definitely not a human. He was just a monster that looked like a human and was fooling all the humans around him. Sigh, I need a break from that world anyway. Come on Kong, let's explore this world, the monster in human skin said as he made clothes appear on the ground, after just drawing a few white lines and closing his eyes for a few seconds. He then proceeded to wear those very clothes and then walked towards me. "Why are you coming over here, you monster? Do you want to eat me? Kong does not get eaten easily. You should ask the giant squid that tried in the lake." However, the monster in the shape of a human did not stop even after I growled at him, and continued forward until I raised my hand into the air out of instinct to get the monster away from me. "Oh no, I do not want any more treatment." I quickly pulled back my already injured hand and bowed my head to the monster, realizing I did not have any power over the current situation. I raised my uninjured palm to him in submission, waiting for permission to raise my head. And it thankfully came, meaning I had been accepted back into the monster's pack. In the next moment, the monster floated onto my head and sat down cross-legged. He raised both of his hands into the air above him and yelled out loud for some reason. "What a wonderful day, come on Kong, repeat after me. Say his words, ape together strong." "Ah, you can't speak, can you? All right then, let's go. Forward my not so noble stead." And so, I began walking forward, hoping the monster in human skin knew where he was taking us. That hope was false. Cedric and Ural, September 20th 1349 of the 5th epoch. In a small village on the coast of Daisy Bay, a bald old man lay sprawled on the ground, tears flowing over the dried tears on his cheeks before falling onto the ground below his head as he stared at the ceiling. He had just confessed to Max that the moment he had carelessly taken the name of a certain Beander organization was the moment he had already signed his death certificate. He did not know it at the time, but a series of events followed as soon as he had taken the name, resulting in him being chased by the believers of the Church of the God of Combat. It was just a cascading series of coincidences that led him to be imprisoned by them in a certain heavily protected location, and ultimately Euxis had come to rescue him by breaking him out, only to realize it was a trap all along, and just as he was going to be killed by the high-sequence Beander, Euxis sacrificed his life to activate a single-use Beander item that destroyed all the tracking methods placed on Cedric, and teleported him away from the enemy Beander. But the teleport was not fast enough, as he not only saw his best, and truthfully only friend left in this world being bisected in two by a fierce attack, but he also had his left hand being obliterated into nothingness by another attack launched by the same Beander. Cedric lifted up his left hand, and looked at the almost healed stump, not feeling anything for the loss of the limb, but feeling immense sadness as it reminded him of a memory he would much rather forget. The memory of his friend, his brother in arms, his only family, and one of the few reasons he had left to struggle to survive in this cruel world being killed just like that. And that too, for trying to help him escape a situation he had thrown himself headfirst into. Sometimes I wonder, Ural, but you renamed yourself to Euxis, right? I wonder, Euxis, I wonder, what I would have been like if we hadn't become Beyonders. Outside a dilapidated shack, a child with a scar on the side of his face curiously knocked on the door. Bang! The door was swung open, revealing an energetic child of a slightly older age, but without any scars on his face or body. He had a wild smile on his face, as he looked around but saw nobody, then looked slightly below his sight level and saw a small kid, an inch or so shorter than him and with a scar on his face, looking up at him with curiosity. "What are you doing?" the older child asked while speaking incredibly quickly. "Don't you know this is an exclusive club, only chefs get in here?" The older child continued, a frown on his face. "Not just any kid with hands and clothes can get in. Do you think you have what it takes? Huh, do you?" But before the scarred child could react, the older one interjected as his frown vanished. "Okay, you're in." The scene rapidly changed to the same dilapidated shack, but the children were a few years older, and a lot healthier as well. "Hey Cedric, why the long face? Come on, we got food to steal and dishes to experiment with." "Alright, hold on, let me just wear my shoes." The two quickly made their way to the market, and with great stealth, teamwork, and pity from the stall owners, took away 2 carrots back to their base of operations. Moments later, after breaking one of the carrots in two, cooking them on an exposed fire, and letting it cool down, the two took big bites out of the cooked carrots, only to freeze a moment later. Blurg! Both of them spat out the charcoal that was in their mouths as black pieces of what could best be described as burnt wood fell to the ground. "Well then, I suppose plan old carrot it is for today, Cedric." "I suppose so," Cedric answered, dejected. "Cheer up now, we got the rest of the day to plan a better meal for the night." Yeah. The scene changed to the always excited and jovial Ural, marrying the love of his life, Cindy Vase, and taking up her surname. It was the first time Cedric had seen the man cry, and that moment made him rear up as well. Then came the child, which marked the second time the old man had cried, and a baby boy, his baby boy had been brought into this world. And then came another scene. It was the moment where Ural's smile vanished. Up till now, even when he had cried, that smile had never gone, always remaining plastered to his face. But this time, it was completely gone, and his expression reminded Cedric of the expression he had had on his face just in the morning when he looked at his reflection in the mirror. It was the face of a man who had given up hope, who had lost everything. Ural stood in silence, the relentless rain pouring onto his black clothes as he stood above a deep hole in the ground. Cedric noticed he was no longer watching everything from a third person's point of view, but now from his own point of view. He reached out and patted Ural's back, the same emotions he had felt that fateful day washed over him once more. Ural turned to Cedric, tears gradually forming in his eyes. "I could have saved them. I could have stopped everything. I don't know, if I could have saved them." Cedric spoke up to stop this line of thought. "You saved me." "You saved her." Cedric pointed at a young girl who was standing in the rain without an umbrella, just like Ural and Cedric. Except, she was not related to anyone here other than Ural, and that too because he had chosen to save her life in a split-second decision, which had resulted in him returning home late, to find his wife and child dead. "Look at her," Cedric pointed at the girl who was just standing still in the rain. "If I'd been stronger, faster, just not wasted my time playing the fool and cooking. You have no idea, if she will live, I will live. Because of what you did." Cedric once again stopped this dangerous line of thought. "I didn't do enough." "You did so much," Cedric interjected. Ural turned to the girl but then turned back to the 2 wooden coffins in the dirt. "They are dead now, because I was not fast enough. Because I did not make sure to keep them safe. Because I was weak." Cedric could not say anything more, as the 3 fated souls stood in the rain in silence, mourning the loss of 2 beautiful souls in exchange for 2 of the 3 present to live. From then on, Ural had never had his smile, ever. Only an ever-present frown. The years passed but Ural could never get over this loss and ended up retiring to open up a cafe in Backland. But his smile never returned. "I don't want to forget. But I don't want to remember it like it is now, all broken up and picked together. I want to remember it as it was when it was good." Cedric cursed himself in his heart. Suddenly, Cedric felt a hand on his head ruffling his non-existent hair. He found himself back in the body of the lost child with a scar on his face and a head full of hair, lying down on the broken wood of the dilapidated shack. In front of him was Ural's younger self, crouching on the ground and speaking soothingly. We had lots of fun together. Thank you for that, little Cedric. But you can't keep looking back to the past that is trying to drag you down. You must look forward to the adventures that await you. Go now, go, you still have something to do. Take care of that little brat for me. Go. Cedric saw the smile he had not seen since Cindy and her child had passed. The smile he had longed to see on his friend and brother. The smile that was now plastered on his face as he opened his eyes, that were no longer dead inside. Instead, a deep resolution formed itself within him. The resolution to do at least one thing right for Ural, one last thing that he could do. Take care of Max. Don't question me. I had just rewatched Schindler's List before writing this chapter, and I had to incorporate that scene into this. Sorry about that, but I felt emotional. Then I remembered the movie Up while writing then and felt even more emotional. So, I did a very stupid thing and looked up sad movie scenes, and felt even more emotional, resulting in this chapter. Sorry if it is not to your liking. I have not proofread this chapter, and honestly, I can't. Too emotionally spent to do anything. Somehow, I am sweating while sitting in the AC, WTF. I would like to thank all those who have added the novel to their collections. I would also like to thank those who give me power stones, and also those who leave reviews and comments. I would especially like to thank the following people. For contributing power stones, chapter comments, and paragraph comments. Seeker contributed 253. For contributing power stones, chapter comments, paragraph comments, and a review, Guyu Fang Yuan contributed 212. For paragraph comments, be they positive or criticizing, Taoist Star, Divinal, Y Chorus 12, Bout _of _madness, RZXs, Pech _C _charu, Zane _tam, Everything on Her Mind, Project _traveler, The Worthy One, Dead Cat 5757, Skills Master Akurai, Magic Sand. I am sorry to those who commented before. Webnovel only lets me see comments from 6 months ago. For chapter comments, be they positive or criticizing, Vivra _calm, Baraka _onyango, Wizened, Man _of _culture _69, AC _adapter _the _2. Thick Thighs, Mr. Oken. I have tried to limit each person's name appearing only once, which is why people like Guyu have only appeared once, else he would be on all lists somehow. Thank you everyone for your unwavering support. I know I should be doing this kind of thing at chapter 100, but I am going out of town for a while, so I uploaded the next few chapters in advance. They will be released automatically at a rate of around 2 chapters per week. Hope everyone likes it. Thank you guys once again. Viva la vida. September 21st th. 1349 of the 5th epoch. I used to rule the world. Seas would rise when I gave the word. Now in the morning, I sleep alone. Through the gentle breeze of the forest, a giant ape with a gray-hooded human atop its head traveled under the light of dawn. A new day had just arrived, and yet the giant ape did not stop walking, and neither did the human stop it, or give to any further instructions. Sweep the streets I used to own. I used to roll the dice. Feel the fear in my enemy's eyes. The monster is really good at making sounds with its human mouth, despite clearly not being human. Whatever it is, this music it's making is really pleasing to the ears, the giant ape thought to itself. Listen as the crowd would sing. Now the old king is dead, long live the king. 1 minute, I held the key. Tears continued rolling from Max's eyes as he did not stop singing. He just observed the rising sun with melancholy weighing down his heart. It had been a whole day, but he had not checked up with either the priests of his church, or Tome and Ademisal. He could not think about them at all, as all his mind was occupied with odd emotions. Next the walls were closed on me, and I discovered that my castle stand upon pillars of salt and pillars of sand. He felt anger, a great inferno that burned his heart. He felt sadness, a well of immensity that weighed down his thoughts. He felt regret, a fierce beast that clawed at his mind. And he somehow felt relief. I hear Jerusalem bells ringin', Roman cavalry choirs are singin'. Be my mirror, my sword and shield. Relief that the old man's death was not his own fault. Relief that he had almost nothing to do with his death. Relief that he could not blame another for the event, and no longer had to take on all the weight on himself. My missionaries in a foreign field. For some reason, I can't explain. Once you'd gone, there was never an honest word. It was incredibly a hypocritical, sadistic, and downright mentally challenged way of thinking. But it was human nature. It was human nature to find something sized to blame for your circumstances. Human nature to find a scapegoat. Human nature to dislodge oneself of fault. And that was when I ruled the world. It was a wicked and wild wind. Blew down the doors to let me in. And yet, it was also human nature to search for hope. It was for this reason that humans were so willing to follow religion. Religion provided the one thing all humans saw, irrespective of their social, political, or economic status. And if no hope was to be found, then to create hope, and place it upon others. Shattered windows and the sound of drums. People couldn't believe what I'd become as. Revolutionaries wait for my head on a silver plate. Max looked up at the rising sun and finally wiped away his tears. It was not time to rest yet. He had long since realized that his emotional attachment to the old man was a lot stronger than he had told himself it was, and he would no longer deny this fact. He did not like this feeling, of having something beautiful and pure, and then having it taken away from you right in front of your eyes. Just a puppet on a lonely string, eh? Ah, who would ever wanna be king? I hear Jerusalem bells ringin'. Max had experienced it before. It was when that crazy B*TCH had killed his parents right in front of his eyes. Back then, he had basically given up on everything until Samuel took over his body and fused with his soul. Roman cavalry choirs are singing, "Be my mirror, my sword and shield, my missionaries in a foreign fields." And he did not like it one bit. Not one bit. I will have my vengeance. For some reason, I can't explain. I know St. Peter won't call my name. Never an honest word. Max's watery eyes stopped crying as they turned incredibly resolute. He would no longer just see if he could get revenge, but he would definitely get revenge, one way or another. And the one he would definitely take his revenge from would be Adam. But that was when I ruled the world. But I will first have to become strong enough to take this revenge. It will take time, but I should be able to do it. As long as I follow my original plan without falling prey to my emotions, I should be able to reach a strength which would allow me to easily take revenge on him. Oh oh oh, 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 oh 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 s, oh oh oh, oh oh oh, oh oh oh, oh oh oh. Max closed his eyes for a brief moment before opening then and speaking to this giant ape, his voice cracking in the middle of his sentence due to his long period of grief and anger. All right Kong, enough strolling for the night. We will head in that direction. And along the way, get some food for yourself, all right? He said while patting the head of the creature who had become like a pet to him, a very fast-moving pet. I hear Jerusalem bells ringin'. Roman cavalry choirs are singin'. Be my mirror, my sword and shield. The odd pair of a monster that had inherited a mind similar to that of a human, and a human whose body and soul had basically become that of a monster's hiding in the skin of a human, continued to walk as Max continued to sing, finishing the lyrics of the sad yet uplifting song Samuel had remembered. My missionaries in a foreign field. For some reason I can't explain. I know St. Peter won't call my name. Never an honest word, but that was when I ruled the world. Undercurrents and Cedric, September 23, th. 1349 of the 5th epoch. Tom, Ashbourne, Mariah, and their leader, Harry all stood silently as they heard the confession of the Beander they had just recently captured alive. This was the one in charge of all the operations in Tingen, and the one who coincidentally, despite being only a Sequence 8 Beander, had connections via mail directly to the top of the entire plot regarding the human trafficking, mainly to keep them updated directly on the situation. The group of four were utterly shocked at the revelation, and more so at the serious implications it would have on not only the Beyonders, but also all the regular people in all of Lowen. Apparently, somebody from a high position in Backland was ordering people to be kidnapped for something big in Backland. Who this person was not known by the Beander, but what he did know, after quite some interrogation, was that a huge event was going to happen in Backland in about a year's time, and a powerful Beander would use it to ascend to the next sequence. That was all he knew, but something like this, happening in the middle of Backland, which was the heart of the Lowen Kingdom, definitely could not be tolerated. Thankfully, they had thoroughly trashed the entire operation in Tingen, and something like this would not happen here for another few years at least. But they had to quickly report it to the church, and then quickly figure out how to stop such activities in the other cities of Lowen as well. Alright, we should go to the church first. There, we can send a message to someone of sufficient authority. They will handle the rest. Good job everyone. Harry ultimately stood up in the silence, and made everyone snap out of their dazes. Though, Tom had not been in a daze, and instead had had his eyes closed, communicating the recent information to the primordial unity silently, before finishing and coming back to his senses. Max, who was in Independence, heard the information Tom had provided him and frowned. The human trafficking should be in full swing by now, so that is no issue. But what is this about a powerful Beyonder undergoing their advancement ritual? The only event that is going to happen within a year's time in Backland would be the Backland Smog, and that would only be used for two things. Firstly, as a cover for all the missing people for the apotheosis ritual of King George August III, and secondly as a digestion for one of the demoness pathway. But she, or he, not quite sure on the gender of demonesses. Anyway, they should already have advanced and be on their way to digesting the potion. Why would they spread false information to people of their own organization? Unless it was a well-thought-out diversion to lead the official Beyonders who became more interested in the missing people in other directions, diverting them from the possibility of the Great Backland Smog happening in the first place. Or, it could be true. Perhaps there was a second demoness involved in this case. Perhaps the first one never actually advanced in the first place. It could be the butterfly effect of my existence changing the fate of the world slightly, despite something oh so clearly trying desperately to turn things back to the way they are supposed to be. If it really is an advancement ritual, then perhaps I could use this for my own. But this would mean getting involved directly with Klein, once again. I should try and avoid him as much as possible. Tom should continue to investigate this, and if he finds more details about this, he should be able to inform me soon enough. But I suppose I should head over to Backland soon. I should be able to instantly travel to Backland if a Demisol requests for the door over there. And if I teach the method of summoning the door to Cedric, then I should be able to use the door to go anywhere I please, by using Independence as a transit location. Cedric. Max made Kong stop his marching and told him to settle down for the day and go and hunt some food. Getting off the giant ape, Max summoned the door, carefully hiding it in case the monkey decided to destroy it, before heading over to Earth. In a small town along the coast of Daisy Bay. Max, you're finally back. Max was surprised when he was tightly embraced by the one-handed, bald, and scarred old man, who had previously looked completely defeated and worn out. Now, the man looked full of energy and vitality, not just physically, but also mentally. He no longer looked like the defeated soldier who had lost everything, and now looked like the resolute hero, who actually had something to protect, something to defend, something to live for. And Samuel saw it in his eyes, the firmness of a man who had come to a decision to protect the one in front of him, and in this case, it was Max. I see. Cedric, you seem to have come to a decision. What is that decision, mind telling me? Samuel pushed Max to ask this question, clearly knowing what he was doing. As a self-acclaimed master manipulator, he knew what he was doing. At least he thought so from his years of only practical experience in the art of twisting words, facts, and people around to benefit yourself, even at the expense of others. Sigh. Yes, I have made a decision. I will fulfill what Euxis would have wanted me to do as his last wish if he had gotten the chance to say it. And that is to protect you. Perfect, then you wouldn't mind closing your eyes and saying a few words, right? Not at all. Good. Then follow my words. I pray to the primordial unity. The unity of the time. The almighty singularity. The ruler of the three realms. Universal amalgamation of all. Cedric had not even spoken the first words and had instead opened his eyes wide upon hearing Max's words. His heart almost reached his mouth and fell out while he felt his whole world spinning rapidly. Oh no, Max has already been corrupted by some unknown being. Ural, I failed you. I could not protect him, Cedric thought in sadness. He was not panicked about the situation, as if it was true, then he no longer had anything to live for. Oh, Cedric, you worry too much. Trust me, and pray to the primordial unity. I cannot say too many things here, but once you pray, I will explain everything to you in a secret location, away from prying eyes. Don't worry, Sec, I'm perfectly fine, right? Cedric waited for a good 4 minutes, waiting for Max's body to rapidly morph into some horrendous abomination as had happened with countless others, Beyonders and humans, who spoke the names of mighty beings without knowing any better. However, nothing happened. After sighing deeply, he decided to just go with it and closed his eyes, repeating the words Max had said with resignation. If Max is already dead, and his body taken over by another, I might as well follow him in death. However, unlike the final rest he had expected, Cedric found himself in a space of complete darkness, with the only source of light being black torches that created light, that was strangely black in color. Welcome, Cedric, to Castle Black. It is the home to the primordial unity, the one who protected me so far. Anyways, now, I will explain to you what you need to do, and how to do it. Max grinned as he saw Cedric's body materialize in Castle Black. Spirit and Correction Force. Backland, in a rented apartment of a busy street. A demisol opened his eyes and grinned widely. Finally, a mission from Mr. But it is only a small one. Should I test and see if one of them would be able to accomplish the task? I should right, yes, it will be a good test, not too dangerous. After all, they only have to create the circle in a safe place. What could possibly go wrong? A demisol quickly began speaking in ancient Hermes. The spirit that wanders about the unfounded. The creature who submits to unity. The messenger that belongs to a follower of unity, a demisol. Instantly, a pale white skeleton hand, that was almost completely drenched in the sticky black tar-like liquid that belonged to the primordial unity, stretched out from the invisible void beyond time and space, and picked up the letter placed on the ground, before picking up the pen that contained some of the primordial unity's energy. This pen was one of countless items Max had handed to a demisol to be used in such rituals after he had realized that his unity energy could corrupt spirits in the spirit realm. Further, any creature corrupted by unity energy would lose all its flesh and become a skeleton. Not only that, they would also become addicted to the unity energy and would use the energy as payment for transferring messages. Considering the amount of energy they used was so minute, it would not even make a dent in the regeneration of his unity energy over time. Max had made a lot of such items, leaving most of them in the amalgamation of all, frequenting sending them to a demisol and the 3 students he had taken in. Each of a demisol, and the 3 students had made such a spirit contract made with a corrupted being. However, Tom had not made such a contract, mainly because he did not get the time to, and was taken for investigation by the Nighthawks. In another apartment, where one of a demisol's 3 students, Fred, resided, a bony hand stretched out from the void. It had thick liquid constantly falling off it, but the liquid that left its body for a long turned into a black mist that returned to the body and turned back into the thick liquid. Fred, who had been reading a book about accounting, was startled by the sudden appearance of the hand but quickly calmed down as he realized what the hand represented. A message from teacher. Fred sighed as he pulled over the message and opened it. A few seconds later, he pulled out a lighter, and lit the paper letter on fire, before throwing it into the fireplace to his right, watching it burn into ashes before proceeding with the instructions on the paper. Soon, a wooden door manifested in front of him, and, the Mr., as his teacher a demisol called him, stepped through. The Mr. seemed to be slightly taken aback at the location but then looked over at Fred, and nodded. Patting him on the shoulder, he picked up the door and placed it carefully on the second symbol of unity Fred had created, before closing his eyes for just an instant, resulting in the door vanishing just like that, along with the circle. Only extinguished candles were left behind. The Mr. then took off, leaving a frowning Fred. I do not get anything for doing all this work. Stupid Fred, of course, you do not. The teacher saved you, apparently with the Misters and the primordial unity's help. They saved you from slavery, or worse, death. Not only that, they also gave you a place to live, food to eat, and the powers of a Beander. Fred looked at his own reflection as he tucked away the silver pendulum he used for divination into his sleeve pocket, a special location from where it could be easily removed for quick on-the-go divinations. Fred, the first among the 3 to accept becoming a Beander, had chosen the pathway of the seer, resulting in him being sequence 9 of the same pathway as Klein coincidentally. Max left the apartment rented by Fred and made his way to one of the several apartments he had rented for himself. Then a strange thought came to him. All the efforts I went through to deliberately not purchase land right now, and wait for the prices to bottom out after the smog are all moot now. I will have to prevent the smog in the first place. Which means prices will not fall drastically in the short run. Perhaps, I should write a letter to Mrs. Dunnant telling her to fully purchase the locations she had rented to build the Dunnant store to ensure somebody does not try to remove her from the market by purchasing the plot of land and removing her as a lease, then building their own version of the Dunnant's department store in the same location. But then again, I could use this event to see how great of a correction force exists in this world. I'm pretty sure it is what has been pushing Klein and the rest of the main cast into following a predetermined path. Even Adam has been unconsciously pushed into following this path that he thinks he himself built. Otherwise, he would have just killed me on the spot, or worse, just directly added me into his story. Why would he ask for permission? Then again, that could be chalked up to the protection cast out by the amalgamation of all which had the last vestiges of unities while still remaining in it, as well as the moon's protection. So perhaps higher-level Beyonders are, to an extent, immune to this force, but most of humanity and most Beyonders are not, which is why everything seems to be flowing in the correct direction, despite the countless warnings I gave to various people, including Klein, Audrey, Alger, and Derek. Deal with the devil. Max decides not to make any rash decisions just yet, and wait to see what exactly was the plan for the Backland smog, and if he could actually use it to advance. If not, then there was no point in actually stopping the smog, and he was better off letting it happen and earn a lot of money by purchasing properties at incredibly low values. Perhaps, waiting might even prove to be beneficial even if he did stop the smog incident, since the correcting force might take action and ultimately create a new incident that would lead to the death of thousands and thousands of people. This correcting force is clearly not fate, else the Beyonders from the Wheel of Fortune would have realized they were being pushed along a single path. No, this has got to be something higher, and less obvious. This was why Max had not named this force, fate as depicted by the countless comics, anime, movies and novels that Samuel had read and watched. It was something similar to the correcting force that only the author of the novel could have, an illogically powerful force that could do whatever it wanted to make something happen the way the author wanted it to, without the characters realizing they were being manipulated. Perhaps the author was some sort of remaining sentient will of the true creator, which would explain why he was not affected, or it could in all possibility, just be the author, and that Max somehow made it into the actual work of the author of Lord of the Mysteries. While Max was contemplating inside the amalgamation of all, to prevent his thoughts from being read or manipulated, he felt a tug on his powers. Glancing in that direction, he noticed it came from the Saphira castle above the spirit realm. Following the tug on his powers, Max realized it was Klein, who was using some odd means to try and eat away at the unity energy. Although the energy did not appear to be changing much with his efforts, Max could instantly tell whatever he was doing was somehow working to an extent. Although it did not reduce the amount of unity energy, it was clearly able to close the hole from which the unity energy was leaking into the Saphira castle. This would limit the amount of energy that could flow into the castle, and if Max let this continue, he would no longer be able to exert any powers within the Sephiroth, and a lot of his long-term plans would be destroyed. More importantly, Klein knew that the black energy belonged to him now, and anything the unity energy did would be linked to himself. If he tried to fight back against Klein, he would be marked as an enemy instead of an ally. An enemy who was trying to take over the Sephiroth that Klein had. This would be even more detrimental than just letting Klein close the hole. Shit, Max cursed. Quickly, Max, burn the energy in the Saphira castle. Burn it and supply the Saphira castle with more energy, in exchange for control over the castle itself. Then use the control to fool Klein into thinking that the hole has been closed. Samuel interjected, causing Max to raise his hand, and the unity energy inside the Saphira castle began to boil. Then, the illusory gray fog surged towards the black smoke that came out of the black liquid and greedily devoured it. Klein, who was seeing this scene, sighed in relief as his plan seemed to work somehow. He also realized that perhaps this black energy was not purposefully brought here by Mr. Death. His plan was simple. He would use the gray fog to produce a projection of how the castle was before the crack had formed and superimposed it onto the current room. His hope was that this would force out the black energy from inside it. And thankfully it seemed to be working. Samuel, the control it has given us is too small. If we try to fool Klein like this. I know. Calm down, Max. Let me try, Samuel said while taking over his body and directly communicating with the Saphira castle. From his basic understanding, and what he could remember, the Saphira castle was an incredibly dangerous existence. Not only was it a Sephiroth, but it belonged to the original Lord of Mysteries, and contained his backup plan to return before the Earth was destroyed by the cosmos and those it represented. Furthermore, this backup plan involved a lot of complicated processes that were already set up by the original owner to be performed over time, like releasing the souls of individuals from before the Earth's human civilization was destroyed and the epochs began, into the current world at given periods of time. As such, the Sephiroth itself did have a rudimentary form of intelligence. At the very least, it was able to understand incredibly basic commands and perform them countless years later without too many problems. As such, Samuel decided to take the risk and began to communicate with the Sephiroth through the rapidly closing connection. At first, he decided to bait it with energy, but no reply came. A lot of offers later, and as the connection was about to be cut off, Samuel went for a final attempt. It was now all or nothing, and he went for it without hesitation. In that very instant, the Saphira castle trembled slightly, as the connection was completely cut off and the chair of Mr. Death was dully repaired. Although it still was slightly turned to face Klein's seat of honor, that was not too much of an issue. Klein sighed in relief as his plan had somehow worked. His ability to create things within the castle using the gray fog had allowed him to create essentially a replica of the castle room, force it into existence, and reject the old room from reality, thus closing the connection with Max. Everything was okay. However, at this moment, unknown to Klein, another structure cracked. In the deepest part of the Saphira castle, hidden under this gray fog, and completely inaccessible to the current Klein, a door of light with a bluish-black luster was present. The door was formed by countless layers of spherical light and spherical light enveloped transparent or translucent squirming maggots. Behind this door, there was a bluish-black fog, hiding something unknown and terrifying. There were completely transparent cocoons hanging by thin black threads from the top of the door, and inside the cocoons were souls from every race, wearing modern clothes, some even holding cell phones. All of them had the aura as though they were living, but their eyes were tightly closed. 3 cocoons were already broken and empty. This door of light, at the base, formed a small crack. It was incredibly tiny compared to the entire enormity of the door, but the crack almost immediately began oozing out thick black liquid, at a rate much faster than it had when it was on Max's scat. Sighing in relief at the success, Samuel gave back control to Max as he was rather tired from the sudden exertion. After all, it had been quite some time since he forcefully pushed Max out of the body and took complete control over it. "We did it," Max approached inside his mind, with a slightly questioning tone yet jubilant tone. "Yes, but we now have a problem." "What?" "I promised that we would help give CW a fighting chance against Klein when the time came. It was the only way to get the breach into the true Saphira castle so Klein would not find it anytime soon." "But that is all right, it was already bound to happen in the original. In fact, till where you had read, Klein and this CW, a truly horrifying existence to be honest, were still embroiled in a struggle over control over his body and the Saphira. The winner would become the Lord of Mysteries." "Right, yes, but this leaves 2 problems," Samuel continued without waiting for Max's input. "Firstly, it means we cannot mess with the plot. We will have to let it go on as it is meant to. Breaking the Backland smog event might lead to a cascade of failing points in time that result in the plot being broken. Or not, the corrective force might be able to bring things back on track if need be. This will be a risk we will have to take to know how far we can bend the corrective force and how powerful the corrective force truly is. If the corrective force fails, we could just more actively participate with Klein ensuring things flow as they are supposed to till the end. But the second problem is much bigger." "And what is that?" Max asked, confused. "Ms. Justice, even if we gain 80% control over the Sephiroth, as long as CW returns successfully, he can wipe out our control from the Sephiroth. Unless we get 100% control, or CW fails in returning, we will not be able to continue to influence the Sephiroth after CW is summoned. But we don't need to influence it. All we needed was a sample of the essence. Why do we need to control it?" Max was even more confused. "The moment the new Lord of Mysteries unseals the other Sephiroths, we will need to first kill him, or gravely injure him in order to create enough chaos for us to sneak into each Sephiroth and gain a sample of their essences and authorities. To succeed in this, we will need some control over the Sephiroth to be able to attack him from where he least expects it. As such, we will need to ensure both CW and Klein start on equal footing, but Klein ends up winning, just so we can injure or seal him away." "But then, can't we just ignore the promise?" Max asked. "Unfortunately, for the deal to be made, I had to promise our souls as payment for failure to comply and use the amalgamation of all as a source of power to execute the failure of payment to the Saphira castle. Basically, both of our souls will be consumed by the Saphira castle if we do not agree. Now I know, it was a rushed decision, but we did not have the time. And if we did not do this, we would definitely not be able to go past sequence 0. We would be stuck as a god forever, and ultimately be killed by those greater beings. Max had his mouth making an O shape in sudden realization. Then a frown returned to his face as he muttered, "This will become a lot more complicated." That it will. Samuel sighed while shaking his head. However, he suddenly turned his head towards the earth as he felt something. One of the Unity souls that had been circling outside the barrier had entered it and was rapidly descending onto the planet, towards another dying person. It's one thing after another. We don't seem to be able to catch a break now, do we? Samuel nudged Max to leave the amalgamation of all and begin his search for the soul. Everything else could wait. There was still a long time before the Backland smog, so he had time for other adventures, like the current one he needed to take with great urgency. But I think we could wait a bit. I have a meeting to keep after all. Max grinned as he recalled the letter he received from Ms. Justice. Of course, this letter was from young Ms. Hall, from Max Verstappen and not from Ms. Justice to Mr. Death. This will be creating a lot of risk in our plans. Samuel berated, still a little tired from his recent escapade. What is the point of just surviving? Life is about living. Everyone is going to die eventually. We must strive to gain control over when that untimely happens. What matters the most is what you do during your limited life, no matter how long. Just surviving will make us no different to bacteria. Plus, I don't exactly have anyone left to protect, just targets for revenge. That can wait. Samuel was stunned into silence at these words. He had not expected Max to suddenly come out with a philosophical monologue out of the blue and fall into contemplation for a moment. I've already died once. Samuel shrugged as allowed Max to return to his body, having a few important pieces of information removed from his mind and stored in the amalgamation of all. September 24, 1349 of the 5th epoch. Max sat on the couch, waiting for Ms. Audrey to come in when she was ready. He had been called here because Audrey wanted to discuss business with him, and also because she wanted to get to know the person who had built up a business he was considerably invested in. This was the official reason she had told Max, but both Max and Audrey knew that this meeting was mainly for her to use her Beander abilities to observe Max and ensure her family was not being scammed by someone. The door was opened by a servant, however, as soon as Audrey saw Max, and as soon as Max saw Audrey, the two were stunned for words. Max's teenage hormones went into overdrive. He had seen Mrs. Hall multiple times, but she was the age of his mother, and often wore incredibly conservative clothing which basically covered most of her body, having only her slightly aged face. However, Audrey wore a tight corset to accentuate her curves and had her golden hair tied in a bun near the top of her head. With her large green eyes and flawless skin, which might have been due to makeup, made her look like some sort of AI-generated work of art. Meanwhile, in Audrey's CYCS, Max, who was supposed to be 18, just a year older than her, with a scrawny build and almost malnourished face, now looked completely different. Max looked like someone who was at least 20 years old just based on his muscular body and tightly fitting clothes. If not for the lack of facial hair, she might have even thought he was older. But more importantly, the bright silver hair almost shone in her eyes, contrasting with his deep crimson eyes that seemed to be made from real blood. His heartbeat increased as a sense of adventure exuded Max, but it was quickly brought under control by her mentality as a Beander, one of the reader pathway. If an outsider were to look at the current scene, they would see flowers begin to appear around them. Max was too flustered to say anything as his face gradually turned redder, and somehow so did Ms. Audrey's. Read the author's note at the end of the chapter, and comment your thoughts. Mr. Death. A few moments of silence later, Samuel had to take over the body again, having recovered his energy since a day had passed, and Max this time actively gave up his body. Ahem, Ms. Hall, I have arrived, just as was asked of me in the letter. But I am not sure what it is we were going to discuss exactly. I apologize for the breach of etiquette. Audrey covered his mouth with her fingers in a mock expression of surprise and apology before getting seated opposite to Max, and beginning her conversation. For the next 20 minutes, they talked about business mainly, however it later transformed into a more casual chat about daily life, and ultimately shifted to the current situation in Backland. Miss Hall, I must warn you that Backland is not as safe as it appears on the surface. In the very near future, quite a few calamities will likely befall it due to the various undercurrents constantly flowing behind the veil of politics, economics, and beyonders. I suppose Miss Hall should already know about the mystic arts, right? Audrey just remained silent before recalling to react and not just hide all emotions, so she nodded as though nothing was wrong. Good. Please take care of yourself and your family, Miss Hall. Ah, yes, before I leave. I have this letter for you. It is not to be opened right now. Only open it before December of this year. Please do not open it until then. All right, Ms. Justice, Mr. Death will see you in a few hours. And with those last words, Max reduced his own weight, jumped out of the window, and ran out of the mansion, careful to avoid the guards and beyonders using the Unity energy to fool their Beyonder abilities and spirit vision, making him non-existent. Meanwhile, Audrey, who was utterly stunned, suddenly felt her heartbeat increasing rapidly at the smile Max had given before he ran away. It felt similar to that of a charming pirate she had read about in a book, one that would fall deeply in love with a noble lady and fight not just against all the other pirates after she is captured by them, but also her own father and her forcibly engaged fiancé when she is successfully rescued from the pirates. A knight in not-so-shining armor. Audrey somehow painted an odd image for Max as her eyes glistened, imagining strange scenes in her mind. However, moments later, her Beyonder abilities recalled every word he had said, and the last words he said caused her to finally break out of the indifferent and aloof expression, revealing one of immense shock. He is Mr. Death. And he knows I am Ms. Justice. Oh no. Meanwhile, Max was laughing giddily while skipping his way to the train station. This was Max's true reaction, and not Samuel's. Despite it being the latter who had actually converted with Ms. Justice, Max felt accomplished at having spoken to her so eloquently and also playing the prank on her before leaving. This kid, he is completely lost. Samuel could not help but shake his head in resignation. After all, Max's body reacted in line with how Max's soul felt most of the time, which meant he would also be in a relationship with a girl half his age if things went the way Max wanted them to. To the side, Unity's soul, which usually appeared formless and colorless, now took the form of a man around the same body shape as Samuel, and only nodded his head silently, resulting in a comedic scene of Samuel and what could only be considered his shadow hobbing their heads in different directions. A few hours later, Klein, who had taken over the persona of the fool, sat at the seat of honor. I was able to remove the black infection caused by Mr. Death from inside this space above the gray fog. He should no longer be able to enter. Now, the question is if I should even bring him into this space, or just leave him out. There could be the possibility of his once again infecting this place with the black substance. If I were to keep him out, he might end up finding a way to contact me in the real world. That would bring about risks of its own. Clearly, the first time I met Mr. Death, he was only a Sequence 9 Beyonder. But when I met him in the graveyard in Tingen, he was clearly a lot more powerful, and not just by a single sequence. Perhaps, the primordial unity, as he called it, descended onto his body like how the fallen creator had descended onto Lenevis to create that child of theirs. Perhaps, Mr. Death is no longer Mr. Death, but has become one with the primordial unity. Perhaps, the true transmigrator like myself, was not Mr. Death, but the god, the primordial unity. Klein came to a horrifying conclusion, for which he did quite a few divinations, but they all ended up in failure. All he could do was sigh and make a choice based on the little information he had. On the one hand, he could avoid the primordial unity and find his own path in this world, or he could take a gamble on this seemingly friendly fellow transmigrator and hope for the best. Doing the former would keep him safe, but leave him with a possible enemy, or at the very least, fewer strong friends like Mr. Azek. Doing the latter would open up an entirely new path for his future, but would also open him up to a lot of possible dangers, most of which he likely did not know about, but knew there were a lot of dangers when reaching out to an entity at the level of a god. What to do, what to do? Klein mused as he rapped the bronze table. He recalled the conversation he had had with Mr. Death, or at least with the one he assumed was Mr. Death, but could have very well been the primordial unity, and finally stopped tapping the table. Instead, he firmly gripped the edge with one hand and waved the gray fog with the other, causing the members of the Tarot Club to appear one by one in flashes of deep crimson. At one side, on the tilted high-back chair, Mr. Death appeared with a wide grin. As usual, Audrey stood up and greeted each one of the members of the Tarot Club. Max nodded silently to her, but he had a cheeky grin on his face. Meanwhile, Audrey also had a smile on her face when greeting Mr. Death, something that was observed by Klein and Alger, who were suspicious of the reason for this. After all, Audrey was of the reader's pathway, a pathway known for hiding emotions and reading the emotions and thoughts of others. Sigh, this is a dangerous game I am playing. Nobody is truly your friend, Klein. Especially not transmigrators. Mr. Death said it himself. Of course, why would the rule not apply to Mr. Death in turn? But, I need to use him to get answers from this primordial unity, or from him if he is like me and is using unity as a disguise. It will be difficult, but it should work. Must be the thoughts of Klein right now. Or at least something very close. From what I can remember, he becomes a lot more cautious and distrustful of others after being killed once in Tingen. And with each volume of the novel, Klein only becomes smarter and sharper to the point he is able to successfully beat a centuries-old monster like Eamon. But that comes much later. For now, all I need to do is plan out my revenge. Of course, against who and why are unknown to me because I have locked up those memories safely in the amalgamation of all. In case some higher beings decide I need a lobotomy, Max grinned at his own smartness, not realizing it was mostly Samuel's plans, which minimum input from him. Max watched as Alger gave his diary pages, and his mind was racing as he was cooking up another important plan of his, this one not locked away. He had been observing the pages created by each of the members, and had been memorizing them since day one. Then, Samuel and he had spent considerable brainpower trying to brute force their way into learning the language. Of course, they already had the completely translated texts from Samuel's memories, which were the freshest for the first volume. With those, he had been able to single out repetitive characters and match them to some words in English. Of course, most of Samuel's idle time was being spent this way, since he quite literally did not have much going on, after not having access to a body himself. Yes, Samuel and Max, as well as Unity were fused into one almost perfectly, unlike the three in on Hotpot of a red priest angel. This meant that Cash Other's souls considered the other souls as part of the whole, compared to the constant struggle the poor red priest had to undergo. A bit of reading chatting between Mr. Fool and Mr. Hangman, Klein issues his mission for assassinating the Intis Republic ambassador who was currently in Backland. Max knew exactly why Ad couldn't help but pity Klein for his current situation. After a while, Audrey accepted the mission, and asked for the psychiatrist potion and ingredients in exchange, but she did not guarantee results. Immediately after, Alger also accepted the mission. I too would like to accept the mission. But first, Mr. Fool, could I speak with Ms. Justice alone? Klein simply waved his hand and a wall of fog covered both Audrey and Max, who simply grinned at the stunned Beander, who had successfully kept her emotions hidden this time around. Ms. Justice, I would like to accept the mission from you instead of Mr. Fool. After all, I cannot bring myself to ask something as lowly as money from a being like Mr. Fool. While saying this, Max made sure to glance over to Klein provocatively, before returning to the conversation. Just how much will you look down on me? Bah, it's true though, I'm poor, Klein lamented, but Mr. Fool remained unmoved. It's fine if you send others for the assassination attempt as well, but if I succeed, I would like a large sum of money. I am in need of it for business purposes. How about £50,000? One assume you have at least that much lying around somewhere in your savings, right? That can be arranged. But, yes, I know, the assassination, rather, the potion is not worth that much. Just consider it a personal favor for me. I will ensure to return the favor, that I assure you. Quote. All right then, great, I'll find you in a few hours if that is all right. And just like that, a stumped Klein was left in the position of Mr. Fool as he saw a deal worth tens of thousands of pounds being completed as a favor for one party. I will never understand the thought process of the rich. Klein lamented once more at his own financial situation. The rest of the meeting continued as they were supposed to. Klein began reading Alger's notes, while Max rattled his brains to come up with something interesting. But ultimately, he had yet to fully decipher Mandarin from the notes, and it would take him quite some time before he truly could do so. Then began the free discussion, and Audrey asked for information about the Dragon Pathway from Derek, who had called the Spectator Pathway the Dragon Pathway, after the mythical creature from which the pathway originated. In exchange, he had asked for the Sun Pathway's Light Supplicant Potion formula. Here, Klein interfered and offered to give the formula to Audrey in exchange for more of the Russell Page diaries, and she gladly agreed. Later, Alger and Max were isolated by the gray fog as Audrey wanted only herself to hear what Little Sun had to say, but Max already knew what he would say. After the discussion was over, Klein sent off the Hanged Man, Ms. Justice, and Little Sun. However, Max was not sent off just yet. Klein was about to speak, but Max interrupted by lifting a hand to face his palm to Cleon. He then willed the gray fog to form a golden monocle and fitted it to his eye before grinning at Klein. "Beware the monocle, Mr. Fool. He will come for you." And with that, his figure was turned into a red light and vanished from the spot. Klein did not pay much attention to the fact that Max seemed to be able to vanish from this space above the gray fog of his own volition, as he had another more important clue to worry about. "Mr. Death told me that he would come for me. He must be someone of a high sequence whose name cannot be taken. Great, now I have another high sequence Beander to worry about," Klein lamented. Max skipped his merry way out of the train station and back towards the Hall mansion. Samuel was cringing visibly from having his body have a relationship with what he could only assume was a child, and one that was not legal yet. "Arg, the space-time police will arrest me at any moment. Nope, I shall have no hand in this. Unity, wake me up after the meeting. I am going to sleep." Samuel closed off all the senses to the outside world that were linked to him and jumped into a never-ending sleep. He would not stand this a second longer. He had done some pretty terrible things in his previous life: blackmail, coerce, drug, even going to the point of destroying someone's political, financial, and personal image to the point 2 people even committed suicide from it. Thankfully, none of that had been tracked back to him by the investigators, and everything had ended rather quickly, since he was actually doing the dirty work of some rather influential people, who only wanted others out of the way and helped blank everything. Who said money can't buy everything? But he would not stand something like this. He could not stand doing anything to an underage Jiri, or a Jiri much too young for him, even if she was past 18. It was one personal rule he stuck low after having a cousin go through harassment in her school and having lifelong trauma from it. Unknown to Samuel, Max's intentions to become something more than just acquaintances were bound for failure, as he was meeting Ms. Justice in secret to hide his identity as a Tarot Club member, and to hide her own identity. Further, he had just met with her a few hours ago, so he could not officially find a way to meet with her. As such, this one would be a very brief, and very anonymous meeting in which he would only meet a butler, who would hand him the money in a briefcase, before rushing to send him off. Dejected at failing to meet her, Max left the mansion and walked into a nearby alley. A determined expression took over his face as he activated his abilities to fool the Beander abilities around him and began running. Somehow, this caused his digestion of the potion to rise quite swiftly and made his way back to the mansions. Knock knock. Audrey was shocked to see an upside-down Max hanging from a tree branch near her window, clearly having sneaked his way here. She was shocked that neither she nor Susie had noticed Max, and what was odder was that using her Beander abilities on him made it seem that he was not actually present. I did not know otter was a word, but autocorrect on word said it exists. You learn something new every day, I suppose. What kind of Beander ability does Mr. Death have? Audrey asked in her mind while reaching out to open the door, carefully using her other hand to hide the letters she had been writing to Furs and Zio for the assassination. Thank you, Ms. Audrey Hall, for the favor. I am just here to say that, goodbye, he said while waving his hand, causing a flower to float to her and land on the table below her. Then he leapt down and ran away, just like he had a few hours ago before the Tarot Club. As Klein finally made his way to leave Backlund through the train station, Audrey was looking at his departing figure with wide eyes as he left in that thief-like manner once again. A few seconds later her expression finally changed as she closed the window and locked it with a slight smile on her lips. As Max sat on the train, he closed his eyes and entered the amalgamation of all to observe how his followers on Independence were doing. A smile appeared on his face as he noticed something. His followers had spread rather magnificently. As it turned out, taking over 2 villages in their integrity, and converting everyone into priests was a good idea. Especially the second village he had helped out, since most of them decided to leave the village like Mark the Missionary, and had basically spread to almost every village and city in the Kingdom of Athens, other than Sparta, which was the capital. Sparta was considered where Max himself would preach, so the others simply steered clear of that place. Most importantly, the clear lack of faith in independence, coupled with the fact that the kingdom officials did not stop them from preaching, earned the trust of the peasants very quickly, which made his religion spread insanely fast. He also realized something: the rate of the regeneration of the unity energy within his Sephiroth had increased a slight bit. Around 1% of what it originally was. This meant that if he could convert everyone on Independence to his religion, he would be able to at the very least double the recovery of unity energy. I should allow for the people to exchange the credits I give out for completing the missions. Make it a proper currency. Perhaps even give it a proper name. Max mused as he willed some changes into existence, and sent a notification to all the priests of the church. I have removed the temporary chapter and put up the real chapter here. Sorry for the delay, one was writing my exams. Anyway, the vote was rather clear. Spectrum won by a landslide. So that is who we are getting. Just a heads up, nothing is impossible and not everything is possible. Diary of the Missionary 2. Mark woke up to the chirpings of the birds and the rustling of leaves. He stretched on the foliage to warm up his body before finally getting up and having a big swig of water from the bottle he carried. Eating a piece of dried meat for breakfast, Mark got onto his horse and began riding once more. His next target was a village outside the land of Athens, a village that was part of another kingdom. However, as soon as the horse began moving, he heard a ding sound coming from everywhere around him. Quickly stopping the horse, he tied it to a tree and then sat down while closing his eyes and praying to the primordial unity. Entering the church's headquarters, he found that almost all the priests had gathered for this occasion, as they had all received the summons. Compared to the usual 5 or so people, this place now had over 50 people in varying shades of black, with the higher-ranking ones like Mark wearing complete black while new priests were in lighter gray cloaks. One by one, everyone sat on the rows of chairs and began to read the announcement on the screens in front. Mark too began to do this same after nodding silently to some of the familiar faces he saw along the way. From this moment forth, credits will no longer be used by the church as a reward for missions, and credits can no longer be used for exchanging information. Mark did not rush to any conclusions, but he still felt a little anger at all his hard work being reduced to nothing without any warning. He had not even been able to exchange any of the credits for any information. Fret not, for all your credits will be safe and converted. The church shall use a new form of currency, units. This currency will not be used to exchange for knowledge. This currency will be rewarded for sacrificing material belongings to the church, and can be used to exchange for material belongings from the church. Material belongings can range from precious ores, metals, wood, plants, food, fertile soil, and anything you can think of. The interface will calculate a price for anything you sacrifice or wish to exchange for in terms of units before you decide to continue with the exchange or sacrifice. Knowledge can be exchanged using KP, which will be rewarded for completing missions. Depending on the mission, you can receive KP as well as units. Knowledge on how to utilize units has been sent to your accounts free of charge and can be learned at your convenience. Knowledge that does not already exist within the database can be added in exchange for KP being deposited to your name. Do note that units can be freely exchanged between individuals and can be exchanged for goods and services amongst each other without using the church's headquarters. Units shall be the true currency used by the Church of Unity's priests and true believers. All credits have been converted into KP with a ratio of 10:1. Do note that KP are more valuable than credits in terms of the knowledge that can be exchanged from them. I see, so a new system has been created by the Primordial One. Units are to be used in place of normal currency between priests, and KP is to be used as currency for knowledge. It is an interesting system, as expected of the Great Unity. Mark praised in his heart before he decided to leave. However, his screen received a new notification. Priest Mark, codename Missionary, a new mission has been assigned to you. You are to take up the mantle of bishop, head to the capital of Athens, Sparta, and aid the king in ruling the kingdom using information you purchase. Note: continuously report your findings to the headquarters. Note: you can use information from other priests to help with your mission. Note: you gain new benefits as part of becoming a bishop. Note: the reward for the mission is permanently being upgraded to the rank of bishop. This is your new mission, should you choose to accept it. Bishop, a rank within the Church of the Primordial Unity that is higher than the rank of priest. Gives one the authority to assign other priests missions to complete in exchange for KP and units. Each bishop is given a quota of KP and units to be used only for assigning missions to other priests, which refreshes each month. As the second highest ranking member of the Church, your goal is to ensure the safety of the Church, and ensure it expands constantly. Mark read through the mission and decided it was best to accept it, not because he would benefit from it, but rather because the mission was given to him by the Primordial Unity. After all, this was the only path he knew of, the path laid out by the Primordial Unity. On accept, and instantly his appearance within the headquarters changed. His clothes changed to a pure black color, with the symbol of unity on the back and at the chest, while a floating black unity appeared above his head and moved with him. Mark only noticed this halo when he noticed everyone disregard high change of clothing and rather stare wide-eyed at his head. "Thank you, Lord Unity, for this blessing on this undeserving servant." Mark bowed towards the primordial unity who was seated on the throne. However, to the shock of everyone present, the primordial unity actually nodded to Mark before returning to its unmoving state. This sudden scene caused everyone to immediately kneel on the ground to the primordial unity. Mark did the same, before taking his leave and returning to his body. He then resolutely turned around and began walking towards Sparta, the capital of the Kingdom of Athens. He would take up the mantle of the aide to the current king, and lead the Kingdom of Athens to prosperity while spreading the faith of his Lord Unity. As is his will, Mark rejoiced at having a task directly given by the primordial unity while skipping along the way. Luke of the Spectrum. Luke opened his eyes and observed his surroundings groggily with a pain in his head. Taking a few seconds to gather himself, he noticed his surroundings more clearly as his vision became focused. He found himself in what could only be called a dilapidated ruin. "Chip, where am I? How long has passed since the explosion?" Assessing situation, location unknown, time unknown. Real helpful, as always. At least I know there is not connection to the quantum network here. Detecting information integration. Do you wish to accept? No, of course not. It's most likely some virus to destroy me. Store it in an isolated location away from all other data of yours, with only access directly to my eyes in the form of images. Negative host. No other information exists. The FCK do you mean? Repeat with detail. No information exists within the memory storage other than the information integration request. So somebody already wiped everything from your database. Alright, let's see what the information integration is. Affirmative. Displaying the first information integration. Then, as though a movie from a first-person point of view was playing, and the longer it played, the more shocked Luke became. This was the story of a child, in a world that seemed to be incredibly devolved in terms of technological advances. World of all, the child died at the end from having his crushed under a falling building. Turning around, Luke noticed the building rubble behind him, as well as a lot of blood below it, partially hidden by the powdered cement and other items but still visible. Raising his hands to his head, he noticed there were no issues other than his skin feeling really soft and slightly wet. "Chip, give me the next information integration." Affirmative. The next information was not something grand like the previous almost movie-like scenario, and instead only contained text. Outer God. Unity. Singularity pathway related with gravitational force. Decay pathway related to weak nuclear force. Paradox pathway related to strong nuclear force. Spectrum pathway related to electromagnetic force. Spectrum pathway related to electromagnetic force. Sequence 0. Spectrum. Sequence 1. Spirit of Eternity. Sequence 2. Priest of Mysteries. Sequence 3. Misfortune Hermit. Sequence 4. Chained Mother. Sequence 5. Death Tower. Sequence 6. Wheel of Error. Sequence 7. Twilight Sun. Sequence 8. Author of Stars. Sequence 9. Iron Enthusiast. What in the world is any of this supposed to mean? That's an outer god. What's a pathway? What is a sequence? Chip, got anything? Negative host. All information from the database has been cleared. Currently, it is impossible to make deductions. Oh, yeah, Chip, scan my memories and add everything to your database. Also, use that information to deduce any and all information you can. Do it quickly while I figure out my situation. Take up 95% of processing power. Affirmative. Luke stood up and looked around, only to stumble after missing his step. Looking down, he realized two things. His skin was a lot darker than it was before the explosion. And secondly, his legs were insanely short. Looking at his own hands, they too looked really short. Then, a realization came to him. He had died in the great explosion. It took most of the city with him, but he had most likely died. But then what about the chip? Hey Chip, are you still present in my brain or somewhere else? Luke was not sure if this was one of those ancient reincarnation novels where the chip would be attached to his soul and not his physical body. That would be pretty cool. Affirmative host. The AX-25 bionic chip is still implanted in your brain. Host. It has been deduced that this is not your body, and yet you have been recognized as the host, while a physical chip is implanted in your brain. A shame, Anyways, what is the progress on the task I gave you? 40% completed. 24 seconds remaining for the copying of memories, host. Perfect. Make sure to begin deductions as soon as possible. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.